Martin Van Hoedinge, is Voucher. We're going to show. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Sustainable Development Committee. This is the first meeting of the new term, and I want in the first place to welcome new members and wish them all the very best and look forward to their contributions during the term, and a very fond welcome to returning members of the committee. Look forward to working with you all over the next while. So please ensure that your microphones are off. And before we begin our business, I'm going to ask Councillor Duncan McInnes to lead us in prayer before we start the meeting. Thank you, Councillor McInnes. We'll just go through now the usual housekeeping points. If you're a member of the committee attending remotely, please leave your camera on and your microphone off. Officers attending remotely, please leave both off unless you are called to speak, to report or answer a question. A reminder to members and officers in the chamber of the queuing system, the chair controls the mics. Well, Marishina does. It's going to help me with first in the queue flashes green and the remainder are solid green. The chair will allow each flashing mic in which will change to red. Only 2 mics on the floor will be red at one time. If you wish to come back on a question, please leave your mic on, and officers speaking to the reports would do the same. Committee members will be given priority. In regard to declarations of interest, members must leave the chamber or end the call remotely. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the Coroner's website following the meeting. Before we move to the formal agenda, I'd just like to make some opening remarks and highlight some of the priorities and themes that we will be looking at going forward as a committee for this term. We have a very full and exciting agenda ahead of us today, and looking to the future, we have a very exciting prospects as well. Despite the challenges we face, there is much to be optimistic about. Just some of the key highlights and themes that we will be considering and also included in this agenda. Retaining our population is absolutely central plank to our strategy going forward. And with that in mind, we've been working, Carmian has been working with the Convention on the Highlands and Islands and pioneering the concept of repopulation zones. And that's really important for us to work with our partner authorities to prioritise retaining our population. Of course, we also have the growth deal projects and the delivery. The hard work that went into securing those deals is now coming to fruition, and we are seeking to develop those projects, and we're working with partner authorities. The leader and I will be meeting with other partner authorities working in Shetland later this afternoon as part of the Islands Committee in developing those projects and their delivery. Of course, renewable energy, again, will be a key focus for us going forward. A lot of hard work over many terms of this council to trying to secure a sustainable future for us in terms of renewables. And hopefully this term will be the delivery term for us and for our island communities, with the potential of close to £2 billion of investment going forward to be invested in the community. So there's a lot happening in terms of renewable energy, and there are two significant reports on the agenda today regarding that. Again, the West Harbour development project, the Coroner has been the linchpin and crucial to the success in securing funding for this project. It's a transformational project, really. And again, it ties in very much with our aspirations around renewable energy and the development of a hydrogen hub at Arnish, which would create quality jobs and a sustainable economy. I think it has the potential of the beating heart of the local economy if we see some of the projects we've been working on coming to fruition. Again, the post-EU structural funding, we have to make the best of what we have in terms of working hard with government and working with partners to secure the best we can in terms of the Prosperity Fund, the replacement for EU structural funds, and also the levelling up funds, engaging with the UK government, ensuring that we get the best possible deal around that. Housing is absolutely crucial to the future, and as part of this committee has taken on that remit, and we do so gladly, and we look forward to working with the officers and our partner agencies in investing again in housing. And again, there's a very substantial report on housing, two substantial reports on housing on the agenda. Connectivity broadband remains a priority too for us as we continue to press government to improve and extend the reach of the R100 programme to ensure our most rural communities have coverage. And of course, crofting and fisheries remain priority sectors for us as we seek to make representations to government on issues affecting their future and sustainability. So all these issues and themes will be coming to us over the next while. But I would like, with your permission, in August, I'd like to convene an informal meeting of the committee so we can have a discussion around all those issues that I've mentioned. I think it would be a good opportunity to hear from new members and from previous members of the committee to discuss all these issues and dig deeper into them and hear your views and try and map out a course for us and how we want to go forward in the work of the committee. So with your permission, we can organise an informal meeting of the committee in August. I want also now to make reference to Mary Sheena MacDonald. If Voucher was depressed yesterday, well, that depression has carried over to this committee as well, because it is with great sadness that we have to bid farewell to Mary Sheena. This will be our last committee meeting, and we're going to miss her terribly. She has been a tower of strength to previous and present chairman of this committee and all members. Her professionalism and commitment has ensured that this committee has been run efficiently over the years, and with a view to making sure that we conduct our business properly and that everything was done correctly and properly and we were doing our duty. She had that remarkable ability to strike fear into members and officers alike to ensure that the agenda deadlines were met and that we were all focused on the job. So I want to thank Mary Sheena for her dedicated public service to the corner for nearly 34 years and wish her all the very best for the future. We're now going to move on to the formal agenda, and that's item 1. That's the minutes of the meeting of the 7th of April, and that's for your approval. Thank you. Item 2 is the minutes of the meeting the 17th of May, and for your approval. Thank you. Item 3 is declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interests they have in any items of the agenda. It would be helpful if members express why they declare an interest in the item concerned. Members in the chamber, please do so by pressing your microphone on or remotely through Teams by using the raise hand function. Please ensure the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item and you adhere to the protocol as previously indicated. Sorry, Councillor Duncan McInnes. Thank you for reminding me, Mr. Kins. I shall do likewise because I'm a member of that group as well, but we can still remain in the meeting for the item. Thank you. Is there any other? Councillor Donald McSween.
Tabloniach Caroch, Hamish son Uyklarig on the Cusper Coach Geog, Scotland, Haminam Val, Amir Board, the side of Gousing, I guess, Nuroseth, maar vast gaan we the memorandum of understanding heinig lesje woensje eigens gaan je Hamish menke voor de ook steeds gewoon jachtjes aan het nu is nog klaar.
Voor die klein Master McSween, Tapelet. Anyone else for the time being? Thank you very much. Item 4 is the performance. Items 4 and 5 are the performance management items. The first one is for the quarter 4 for 2021-22 on the economic development and planning. The report is for noting and provides an overview of the Communities Department business plan and related performance for economic development and planning for quarter 4 year end. And Joe McPhee, Head of Economic Development and Planning and based in the Communities Department, will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The business performance begins at section 6.1 of the report in front of you. And it covers each of the functional areas under economic development and planning. In terms of heritage, the key focus has been on maintaining services to the public at the museum and Tasclan and Yilling, as well as supporting a wide range of community heritage groups and a number of heritage projects throughout the islands. The team has also been very successful in securing funding for projects like the Voucher project, which is an archaeology-led project looking at the archaeology collection, and also the UIST Virtual Archaeology Project, the UVA project, and also discussions in relation to a future archaeology strategy. In terms of planning services, in terms of development management, a lot of the focus on the priority has been on just dealing with cases. And that continues to be the priority for the team going forward. You'll also note in the report, and I'll come back to this perhaps at the end, the increase in planning applications for the year, an increase of 90, an increase in 40 in the previous year, so 130 additional cases over the last 2 years. And that's a significant increase given the sort of range and complexity of cases that the team are dealing with. In terms of development planning, the activity is centred very much around legislation emanating from the new Planning Act, particularly around the National Planning Framework, the NPF4, and other related activity on housing needs assessment, spatial strategy, short-term lets. Work also undertaken on issuing new supplementary guidance across key areas like wind, energy, and caravan huts and temporary buildings, and undertaking the housing land audit. Building standards also notes an increase in cases, and that's probably commensurate with the increase in planning cases, and all targets met within the building standards team. In terms of Business Gateway, there is a concurrent report on Business Gateway to the committee, so I won't dwell on the details of that and let the service manager speak to that report when that item comes. Leader has been mentioned, Chair, and the final Leader programme of this current programme is now finished, and indeed it marks the end of the 30 years of the Leader programme across the Outer Hebrides, and a very successful last programme and a successful delivery of that programme since its inception. And in addition to tying off the previous programme, the team have been involved in a number of projects, as you can see there in the report, the community shout out, embedding young people into the community, and some CLLD activity. And again, there's a concurrent report on CLLD, community-led local development, to the committee. It also includes, of course, the EMFF, which is the fisheries element of Leader. Again, a very successful project, and the fisheries and marine resources team working on a number of fisheries type cases and supporting the development of the primary industries theme under the Islands Deal. In terms of regeneration and sectoral project activity across economic development, a significant number of projects being supported, number of schemes being delivered, sometimes under quite challenging timescales to actually commit and ensure that all the legal commitments in relation to all of these schemes are done by the deadlines that are set before us, normally by Scottish Government. And that team has been incredibly successful in securing match funding for a range of projects, and indeed for a number of critical projects, additional funding from Scottish Government on top of the funding previously agreed. And I think that's a measure of the status in which the team is held by Scottish Government officials and the relationship that we've built up over the years with those officials, that we can ask them for help when that help is needed. Officers have led and contributed significantly to the development of the Islands Deal and the outline business cases, the OBCs. These are very, very weighty documents for each and every project under the Islands Deal, and that's taken up a significant amount of officer time, and also dealing with the feedback from Scottish and UK governments across the various deal projects. Other key project activities include the spaceport, the Castle Grounds regen, which we hope will be coming to its conclusion later this year, and engagement across a whole range of sectoral activity and economic recovery activity. And we have to remember that we're still really in economic recovery, and we're engaging across a whole range of economic recovery type activities. In terms of finances, the outturn is slightly over budget in terms of the economic development and planning outturn, but within tolerances. I've said at the end of the report, in terms of key highlights, areas of concern, there's been good successes, I think, in the year just in maintaining services against a backdrop of COVID, and COVID still continues to affect service delivery. But I think all staff have contributed magnificently, I think, to frontline service delivery and ensuring we meet all our targets. I've mentioned already significant levels of additional funding and the confidence that gives both the community organisations and the government agencies that we deal with in terms of our ability to deliver and support project activity. I've mentioned the islands deal already. Challenges do remain in terms of frontline staff resources. I've already mentioned planning. We need more frontline planning officers to deliver and to deal with increased activity. And looking ahead, Chair, and you've indicated at the informal meeting, and perhaps we can look at that at the informal. The number of projects in the pipeline is huge. I've never seen so much activity, but it will come at a cost in terms of our ability to deal and support those projects. So that's the summary, Chair. Happy to take questions from members.
Thank you, Mr. McPhee. First of all, can I ask those online if they're hearing us okay? Please indicate if you can't. Well, you probably can't indicate if you can't. If you.
Yes, I'm hearing told. That's John MacLeod.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. McPhee, for that overview of a very comprehensive report there. Any members have any questions for Mr. McPhee at the moment? Okay, thanks very much. But in relation to the planning service, absolutely, it's coming under huge strain, and there are capacity issues, and we will put that on the agenda for the seminar. Councillor John Norman, MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Joe, for your report. Just a quick question. What was the value of Leader? What was it worth to the Council for the Western Isles over the year? Per year, sorry. Can you get a sort of figure?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if Kathleen Morrison is here. I think she is. Kathleen, are you able to provide detail of the sort of annual figure in relation to Leader, approximately, say, across the last programme?
Hi, good morning. I can. I'm just not sure off the top of my head just now. It's just
a ballpark figure in terms of last programme. No, forgive me. £10 in the.
Over in the last programme, including Leader and all the public and private match, it was worth 8.83 million to the local economy. Over the 30 years, Leader brought in was worth 34.5 million to the Outer Hebrides.
Okay, thanks for that,
Thank you.
Kathleen. Okay, John. Mustafa, Councillor Mustafa. Sorry. That's you.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank Joe for the report. You're talking about economic recovery, and I haven't seen much in the report about broadband and broadband investment, as you're aware, especially in our neck of the woods down there. I mean, if I cite a village like Lochiport, where we have a lot of businesses that moved and young couple that relocated to the island. But one of the complaints I'm having from some of the constituents there is they're still relying on two ways and expensive way of doing business, and that's obviously hampering their activities. So is there any way that we're looking at improving broadband and expanding the benefit that, especially when we know the cable passes through the main road there, so it's easy to extend it there. So is there, there is, I think from my recollection, there's about 4 new businesses there, young people that moved up, so.
Okay. Joe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Previous members will recall the presentation from the Scottish Government on the R100 project at the last committee series, I think in September 21. The R100 is the Scottish Government's programme for rolling out broadband throughout Scotland. The timescale for the rollout of R100 in the Outer Hebrides is 2025-26. So in terms of particular investment, that is the investment timescale for us. They do operate some schemes to help people in the interim, the Scottish Broadband Voucher scheme. To date, there have been no vouchers at all in the Outer Hebrides, and we've made representation to them that that type of scheme, a voucher scheme, even if communities can get together and put their vouchers together to create a larger pot, doesn't really work for us because of the scale of the communities is just too small. And we've already seen examples where this has been attempted, but the cost just outweighs any funding, even if those vouchers are put together. We are in constant discussion with the Scottish Government on R100. There are other mobile 4G mobile investments underway, and in many cases the 4G service is reasonably good, but still there is more that can be done. And we're aware, obviously, recently of particular problems. If a mobile service goes down, the time it takes for the mobile operators to fix the problem is increasing. It seems that these things are increasingly served from the mainland, and contractors are waiting until they have a number of jobs before they actually come and do particular activity. It's a major concern, I think, and it's certainly one for us to discuss, I would suggest, Chair, in August. Our own hands are tied. We don't have funding to contribute to that kind of activity. There are discussions going on around how we get to the very hard to reach areas. And I think some of that may well have to come from an intervention by the Corridor and its partners. And I know there is a will to do something, for example, within the used repopulation zone, and that item's coming up later. There is a will to do something specific there. We just need to find a way of doing it, rather than waiting for another 4 to 5 years before some people get a reasonable broadband connection. But that's an outline of the picture. It's not entirely satisfactory, as you know, but it's probably the reality of what is planned.
Thank you, Mr. McPhee. The voucher scheme is wholly inadequate and doesn't meet the needs at all of what and we've made representations on the back of that visit, that presentation last September. We made representation to the Scottish Government and we didn't receive a very favourable answer, but we're going to continue to press them on this issue. And like Mr. McPhee said, it'll be another item for our seminar, informal meeting in August.
It might be wholly inadequate to wait, especially for young businesses to wait for another 4 or 5 years. So maybe an opportunity to look maybe in August to see if we can do something.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor McCormick.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do appreciate that really across the service there are significant pressures on staff. We're working with significantly fewer staff than we've had in the past. The 2 areas I wanted to just highlight for your attention and a need for significant work to go on into supporting them. One is the Heritage Service and the other is the Planning Service. In the last few years of the last council, I engaged with both of these services significantly. I was extremely pleased with the assistance that I received and the work that was done. But I realised that they were under very great pressure. And I'd like to think that we can relieve that pressure on these particular areas of work in the council in the not too distant future.
Absolutely, Mr. McCormick. Thank you. Joe, do you want to come in?
Chair, any support for these frontline services, and they are dealing, with frontline issues on a daily basis, would be most welcome.
Absolutely, and we will certainly do that. Vice Chairman, Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Regarding the broadband issues, I can assure you that they're not exactly confined to remote areas. I would just like to ask Joe regarding the voucher scheme. I have a constituent living in the village of Portvaller. She's built a new build, certainly not more than 50 to 100 yards away from her nearest neighbour. And she was in touch with Openreach about providing a line to her house. And she was quoted a price of £13,000 for her connection from Openreach. Obviously, she's contested this, and they've now reduced that to just under £600. Would she be able to access the scheme for the voucher at all? I know the guy was grilled when he was here in September as part of a government fob off for us when BT practically washed their hands with remote connectivity and villages, particularly down the bays, etc. And in Uists, they were really not forthcoming with a plan on how to connect these remote villages up, and not necessarily remote. We've got places where the cable actually runs by houses and villages where they can't get connected as well. We need to keep pushing on this. It's a huge issue. We're talking about connectivity, and the money that was thrown to BT and Openreach for connecting the last 5% of the remote areas was significant, and they're basically washing their hands. And I think we need to keep the pressure up on BT and Openreach to connect these remoter areas, because they're certainly not living up to their mantras. If anybody looks on their website, you'll find out they're spouting this nonsense about connectivity and everybody has access and how it's going to empower everybody. But they're just forgetting conveniently about the remote areas they can't connect, and I think we need to continue to keep pressure on them because it enables communities and individuals to access work, etc. And it's vital that we connect everybody up. I mean, it wasn't difficult to connect, or it may have been difficult to connect with a hydro, but they still managed electricity to the houses. BT should be under the same imperative to do what it says in the tin, and that's to connect people to their broadband. Thanks.
Okay, Norman, thank you. Joe, do you want to come back to that?
Yes, happy to take any information that Councillor MacDonald has, and I'll pass it on to the relevant people in terms of the voucher scheme. So if Councillor MacDonald would pass the details on to me, I'll pass those on to the appropriate people.
Yeah,
Will do.
thank you. Councillor Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just to follow on from what Norrie said. Yeah, I mean, in our case, we lost a very good family in Harris because of the problem with the broadband. Two professional people that worked from home, and professional pharmacologists who were very high up in their companies, and the wife was from Harris originally, and were looking to build a house on the Croft, and in the end, after 3 years renting, they just gave up and just said, we've got to go back to Glasgow. We can't live like this. So we lost that family, very sad loss, and that was directly because of the broadband, lack of it in their village. Although it went straight past down towards Leverborough, where they were, it wasn't connected. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Firring. I'm sure there's very similar cases as well throughout the islands. Any other comments or observations on the report? If not, thank you. We now move on to members are asked to agree with notes report. Now move on to item 5, performance management, again Q4, and this covers the items relevant to our own committee, and the Director, Deputy Chief Executive Carmian McKeever will speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, the elements relevant to this committee are the housing services, which is at item 6.1 of the report, and energy at 6.9. In relation to housing, the key focus over the past period has been on the affordable housing programme, and as the report states, we presently have 30 units on site in development, 86 going through financial assessment or planning, and we would hope that they will translate to on-site projects over the course of this quarter, and there have been 213 completions since the beginning of the present programme. We have been in discussions with developers to see if they can bring forward developer-led projects, and we do see quite a lot of opportunity in that, and we anticipate a number of developers coming forward with ideas. We've spoken to government about some of these ideas. Government have not quite signed off yet, but have certainly given the green light to take them to the next stage. So we're quite hopeful that some of that innovation will come through over the next period. And similarly, on empty homes, we see ways and methodology for bringing some empty homes back into productive use over the next period. So a lot of positives in that area. Negatives, unfortunately, are around the acceleration in cost of materials. That is beginning to impact on the programme, and it will impact further on the programme over the next period unless we see some sort of return to more normalised pricing and more stability in the supply chain. In regard to homelessness, a key focus for the service there as well, 152 presentations over the course of the year, which is broadly in line with previous years. We are feeling a lot of challenge around medical adaptation budget, which is under significant pressure, and there's a more substantive report on the agenda in regard to that. In regard to the insulation programme, as returning members will be aware, Tehin Inshigal TIG were our managing agents for the home energy efficiency programme, and as members will be aware, they've now withdrawn from the programme. This was due to a new piece of national quality standard legislation passed 2035. That has now forced us into having to re-tender the programme, so we're working on putting these tender documents together at the moment. We've also been in discussion with the local construction sector to see is there a methodology of bringing some form of support into place for the period it'll take to re-tender the work. So we've had a good reaction to that, and we anticipate a proposal coming in from the construction sector in the course of this week. We will then have to discuss with government and perhaps see if we can get a derogation or relaxation from government to allow work to happen over the next period. Our initial sounding from government officials is reasonably positive, so I'm hopeful that we will be able to get a contractor in place for the insulation programme over the next period. So we anticipate that the tendering not being completed and a new contractor in place until the beginning of the year. But if the government allows us the relaxation we're hoping for, that should allow us to put a contractor in place between July and December, which will be very helpful because there is a lot of money in the insulation programme that we're not able to spend at present. In relation to energy, there are two substantive reports on the agenda, so I don't propose to go into that area in any detail at this point. Criticality for myself is over the next period. We anticipate the results from the present contracts for different CFD allocation round to be out in July. If the Stornoway Wind Farm is successful in that CFD allocation round, that should trigger the transmission owner, SSE, submitting the needs case back to Ofgem, and we're hopeful of Ofgem reaching a conclusion on that in the course of this year. So I think the next number of months are going to be critical months for our renewable energy ambitions, and I think we need some good solid political engagement, Chairman, with UK government and Ofgem in particular, and I'll maybe be discussing with yourself and the council leader how we go about some of that work over the next quarter. Financial performance is outlined at 9.1 of the report, and you should be aware, Chair, that financial performance amalgamates your own committee, Sustainable Development, and the former Communities and Housing Committee elements. 9.4 shows the total financial performance of that committee, which shows a slight overspend of £9,000, which is against a total budget of 5.7 million, which, given the pandemic issues and the cost escalations we've seen over the past 12 or so months, I think this represents a good outturn. Happy to leave it at that, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Very good. Mr. McKeever, thank you. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to express my thanks to the Director for his work on the insulation on the past 2035 problem that we had. Can I ask, have they relaxed? Are they going to revert back to the previous regulations, or are they going to, is there some sort of slight amendment to the current ones? Why I'm asking that is, would it be a change that would encourage TIG to come back to the table, as it were?
Mr. McKeever. Mr. President.
I think, apologies for that, Chair. I think there is a process where a national process where they're looking at the impact of this new legislation and what it's doing nationally. So there is a working group that is looking at that, and we'll see what they report in due course. I think it's unlikely they're going to reverse what they're wanting to do around past 2035, but there may be some form of relaxations, for specific areas to allow the programme to be delivered in a way that's appropriate for specific areas. In regard to TIG, I don't think they are looking to re-enter this area, but I think there is quite a number of companies in the local contracting sector that may be looking to take on some of the TIG staff and some of the TIG expertise. So I think the programme will be delivered in a different way, but I don't think it will be delivered through TIG.
Thank you. Shiva? I think it was Mr. McCormick first and then Councillor Macaulay.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I wondered if, I mean, it's deeply worrying that our young people cannot find a home to live in our islands. That's at a price that they can afford. And we lose a lot of our young people because of that. And I also am conscious, as possibly we all are, that there are quite a number of young people who would love to come home, but can't do so because they can't find anywhere to stay. And I wondered, in terms of the Empty Homes partnership, whether given that we are, I think, financially supporting that to some extent, is there any way in which we can place some kind of regulation on what happens with that home once it is brought back into being? It seems to me that at the moment that in most of the cases, these homes are either going for holiday let type thing, or they're just being sold to the highest bidder. And neither of these things, of course, help our own young people who aspire to have a home. May I just raise a second point, if that's all right? The second point was in regard to fuel poverty, which is a very, very serious problem indeed for us, and it is increasing almost daily in the islands, unfortunately. And indeed, it is the one way in which we could assist local people more than anything else that we might do, is to make their houses be able to heat their houses at a reasonable cost. So I was very disappointed when Patrick Harvey didn't come with a solution. That's what I thought he was coming with. And I wasn't able to meet because I thought that I had COVID. So I thought I'd better not meet him when I had COVID. So as it turned out, I didn't. But so I wasn't able to speak with him personally myself. And I know that Calamian had meetings with him. It is very disappointing that the government has taken such a long time over this. Why on earth couldn't they have given it a bit more priority than they did in order to assist us? And I raised with him in writing, at least also the anomaly whereby we are paying more for our electricity here in the islands than he is paying in Edinburgh, in the hope that maybe he might address that too. I've had an acknowledgement of my observations, but nothing more than that. So I would be very, very pleased if we could come up with another scheme in terms of insulating our houses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. In regard to empty homes, the service at the moment is an advisory service, so it's advising people how to deal with their empty homes, how either to renovate them, bring them back onto the market, etc. So in that extent, we cannot burden them, and we cannot, put any strictures on what the people may do. I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but I can find them. But the majority have come back into the pure housing market and are providing homes, in particular for extended family members. So some have definitely gone into the tourism market, some have gone to short-term lets, but the vast majority have become part of the housing market. So I think that is reasonably positive. What we're looking to do on empty houses over the next period is to intervene a bit more directly as a council. And if we're able to do that, we will, in that sort of intervention, be able to burden the house. And the sort of burdens we would look at would be availability for young families and young people. So I do think there is a way forward in which we can look at finding ways to make empty properties work a bit better for the general housing market. In regard to fuel poverty, yes, it's hugely disappointing. The new legislation, and that we haven't been able to achieve the required flexibility around that to keep the programme going. However, I think the government is open to these flexibilities, and hopefully, when we do get the contractor-led solution coming in the next week, I would hope that when we present that to government, that they are open to giving some form of relaxation or some form of derogation that will allow the programme to be up and running again over the next number of weeks.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Sorry, Ian. Councillor Ian McCauley.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, Calamian. I'm just wondering, with the housing developments due to start, I'm thinking particularly one in my own ward in Blackwater, where there's 72 houses due to in the planning process. Given the concerns that we all have with materials and etc., what kind of is the worst and best case scenario here? I mean, presumably this project will go ahead at some point, but obviously that there must be concerns, and is there ways of getting the funding or more funding? I would assume that's now going to be required for it. And what's exactly the situation? Thanks very much.
Each of these projects, Chair, is made up of a combination of government grant and HHP borrowing. As costs escalate, then there's little doubt that the government is going to have to put in more grant to make these projects viable. So that discussion is ongoing with government at the moment. The way it works at present, there is a benchmark set. In the Outer Hebrides, we're significantly ahead of benchmark virtually on every project we do. So the question is how far government is willing to go beyond benchmark to make future projects happen. They'll be able to go some way, I've got no doubt. You know, they are signalling that they will put more interventions into new projects in the Outer Hebrides. But the challenge becomes a challenge for HHP. If they have to borrow on each unit and their cost of borrowing goes up, then that may make it more challenging. So there is an ongoing discussion around how we handle that cost escalation and how we get more funding into individual projects. There is also a challenge for projects who are on site at the moment, who came on site with a particular level of intervention, thinking the cost of the build out of the project would be Y, for them now to be finding out the cost of the build out is actually Z. So there is a discussion with government around some of these projects as well. So I think there is a commitment from government to put more money into individual projects, but that'll be a project by project, case by case discussion.
Thank you. One more question. Is there a timescale for this particular development?
Can you put yours off maybe, Tom?
Thanks, Chair. If I'm understanding correctly, they are just working on the final technical aspects around finalising their planning conditions, and hopefully they are going to be on site in very due course. I don't know if Mr. Watson's got any additional detail beyond that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Mr. McKeever was saying, they're hoping to be on site very soon. Just having discussions with our planning colleagues about a number of outstanding conditions, and the contractor are very eager to get on site as soon as possible. And just on that, so we're talking of on site, since we prepared the report, the Lochmaddy Old Hospital has gone on site, as has the development at Crowlista. So there's a good bit of activity happening in the last few weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Okay, Councillor Donald McSween and then Councillor Francis Murray.
Tabel of Niachcaroch. Just to ask on insulation, agus marva no real generic a real to sakutragaram, gewel shorst the blanket bands to hun stachel routen. Agus route ha chulik met raas chemonie. So han ik eindelijk dan die stachel no real to dan kan er behorgig blanket band janu whether wie buin monie. Juntig gaat lussen. Ach, maar accuus en de raast, me veeg in over aan de niche heb buin, ha 3 uur geworden ik blionse, zo blionige nelles. Want je nog eens naar de konrijns en wie aan kunt ook routen, maar gefeeme gaat wie ader wie ach gewel teun je haast de buin monie, ik ieder pak bi toch ach gewel kutter mag ga teun.
I'm just going to charge time if you can do if that's a real to start in the share who's back as doing in Buin Monia has some Buin Nad and Halapa heights and feet in Kivel Buin Montjoch, I guess open the Yaring open the Moon and the Crete in Kivelschen Reat and Son and Arinoch. So machine can you feet and do if that's a back as a middle in at Buin Monoch has some killer real to a coin other móntiogs, die so in Indiana le móntiogs fel doi yn awn sy'n bod yn ile Indiana le Siavonia. So ham fit in Corman, as a beon is in de heen, gyharaid son eirach yn conios nog, son opeth kuth móntioch arall as een doi nater och bavishi, ach man me graag en gaat dit bakig se byd buen móntioch.
Thank you. We will fight for our right to cut peat. Councillor Francis Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to congratulate everybody involved in the Scotland Street development, which I think was done in a way that really, pulls a few things together. It provides housing. It, ensures something that's part of the heritage of the town was restored to the way it was, and it improved the environment of that bit of the town, and did so in a very, very tasteful way, I thought, and down to the last detail, the red school bell, and I think it was, it's a very good example of how what was an empty building, which could have led to problems in that area, has been restored and brought some affordable housing in doing so. So congratulations to everybody involved in that.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Yes, it was an absolutely great achievement, restoring that building, a historic building, like you said. Convener. Stop pressing the button now, press one.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much, Chair. Moving on from what Councillor Angus McCormack was saying about empty homes and the problems, young couples have in buying properties here. Another area of concern, I would say, is the amount of second homes in the more rural areas of the Western Isles. And I think it's becoming more and more obvious, year after year, that there's more and more second homes being bought by some speculators and people, with no connections to the island, meaning that our young people can't get onto the property market. In Wales a few months ago, the way they went round this is there was a number of areas in Wales, and one of the local authorities there, I can't remember which one, they've increased the council tax on holiday homes to 300%. Maybe it's something we could possibly look at, because I think that would deter people from buying, a second home in a rural area of, the islands. If council tax was put up to 300%, we heard this morning on the radio, Tyree, where 50% of the homes on that island are holiday homes. So we've got to be careful that the Western Isles don't end up, in a few years' time, where most of the properties in the villages, we're seeing villages there, throughout the islands, where there's only 2 of the homes there out of, say, 10, 12 houses in a village. They're only occupied, 12 months of the year. The rest are holiday homes or Airbnbs, and it's quite concerning. Would there be any way of looking at that for, increasing council tax on the, holiday homes too? What they did in Wales. I know it didn't go down well with the people who owned the houses, quite naturally, but I think they had to do something about it, and hopefully it's progress.
Thanks, Convener. Absolutely. I think that's an issue for us as members in terms of the budget board and developing the forthcoming budget, something for discussion and something in terms of our own seminar in August. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think we already are at the maximum we're allowed to tax second homes at the moment, but we can certainly take it forward and begin to explore what are the mechanisms to allow us to tax second homes further. There is a report on the agenda around short-term lets, and there is new legislation available from the government around control areas for certain types of property in areas. So this is a tool that's now available to the Colony and other Scottish local authorities to look at certain areas and to begin to bring in legislation to control the types of properties in particular areas. So that may be something that we need to explore in a bit more depth over the coming months, and that may again be a topic for us beginning to look like a very busy seminar in August, Chairman. But I think there is definitely something around control areas and short-term lets that we've got to do a bit more work on over the coming period. In regard to short-term lets, we have to have the scheme in operation from the 1st of October. But in regard to control areas, that is still up to ourselves to work out exactly how we want to utilise that provision.
Thank you. In terms of council tax, that'll be an issue for the budget board, like I said, and policy and resources. Councillor Hussain. Okay, I'll get him.
Sorry, me?
I'm sorry, staff. I'll take in Mr. Mackenzie. He was in before you.
Oh, okay. Yes, actually, I think Kenny must have been reading my mind, because it's on the same theme, and more or less most of what I was going to ask he's already brought up. But I think this does deserve almost a seminar on its own, because it is a major problem. And one of the questions I was going to ask, following up from what Councillor McCormack raised, how these 170 properties break down in terms of, you say you've got most of them are going back into the housing stock, which is good. But it'd be interesting to see what proportion have become Airbnbs. And I don't know if we have the follow-up statistics on that. But anyway, that's something that maybe could be provided later on.
Thank you.
So I think this question of second homes does need a seminar on its own. I know when it was raised in the past that I think the chief executive said it was supply and demand. So, referring to some of the ridiculous prices that were quoted for, crofts or portions of land down in Harris, for instance. And there should be some way of controlling this. And I don't believe that, it should all be a case of supply and demand. And I think the question of, even the council tax, when you've got somebody paying $250,000 for a piece of land, I don't think putting up the council tax by, 3 times or whatever will really put them off. Just my own opinion on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. I don't know if Mr. Watson wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we can certainly provide a breakdown on the properties, the empty homes that have been through the process, if you like, to give you an idea of what they're being used for. But as Mr. McKeever mentioned, it's purely advisory, the role that we have at the moment, although we understand the Scottish Government are considering introducing an empty homes scheme in the not too distant future. We're just waiting to hear what that would entail, but we're hoping that will be a form of grant being made available, and that could be linked in with conditions on the use of a property if it's brought back into the market. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. I'm conscious that all of the questions have been around the House now. We do have 2 big reports coming up on the agenda on that, so we want to wind up this item. Councillor Singh. Sorry, Mustafa, I didn't put your mic on.
Thank you, Chair. One of the first question I have is around the medical adaptation grants. That seems to be at the moment.
There's a report coming up on that.
Okay.
Later on the agenda. If you're okay to wait until then. Do you have another question?
It was around the homeless as well. There is a report coming on that, so I'll just have to wait to that.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I know. Vice Chairman, Mr. MacDonald, and then John Norman MacLeod.
Yeah, thanks
And
again,
then we'll
Chair.
wind up. Then we'll wind this up.
Yeah, I think a seminar involving all the agencies when we're talking about housing and second homes, particularly the Crofting Commission, would be pertinent. I think as well, local tourist authority, just to find out, explore the options of where we are with this, because there's a huge problem. Anecdotally, I've heard that there was a particular Crofts with a house that sold in Luscantire recently, where the house was demolished, and the house that's going in its place will be apparently on the rental market at circa £5,000 a week. So we've seen speculation here, and I've commented before that Crofts are now become the Bitcoin of the Western Isles, and there's no legislation being put forward by the Crofting Commission to deal with this trade. And we certainly need a sit-down meeting and a seminar to explore the options of how we can regulate it, control it, and use it to the advantage of everybody concerned, because we certainly need some kind of format where it's regulated.
Indeed, Mr. MacDonald. Thank you. Councillor John Norman MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to keep you long. Just following on from what the convener was saying there, 300%, it is a lot, but fair enough, I do agree to a certain extent, but I would say that family-owned sort of properties, family-owned houses by family on the mainland, we should really think about maybe not them. Fair enough, people who buy from the southern England and buy second homes, etc. But I would sort of be a bit wary about the local people ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then, and as far as this committee's interests are concerned, members are asked to agree the recommendations 3.1. Thank you very much. Item 6 now is local government benchmarking framework results for 2021. Report informs the cone of the local government benchmarking framework results for the Communities Department and seeks approval of the priority areas chosen for service improvement. The service area of relevance to this committee is economic development and planning and is detailed at Appendix 4. The Director will introduce the report, and Mr McPhee is also available to answer any specific questions regarding the service area.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, the elements relevant to this committee are around economic development, and within that there are 9 indicators around culture and heritage theme and 12 within the economic development theme. The 2 target indicators were year-on-year improvements in the cost of museum visits and year-on-year improvements in satisfaction levels with museums. Regarding costs, there was an increase in 2021 over historic performance. This is in the main attributed to COVID-19 issues. Despite that increase, we remain on par with comparator local economies such as Shetland, and which is significantly lower than Orkney. Satisfaction level in the museum has been decreasing. This data is drawn from the Scottish Household Survey, and it's difficult to fully understand what lies behind the data. I think it's important to note that the data covers all museums and galleries across the Outer Hebrides and not just Museum Ninilan. In regard to Museum Ninilan itself, both at Lewis Castle and in Lenaclake, we keep local satisfaction surveys for all visitors, and the feedback is very positive. Similarly, in a recent TripAdvisor survey, the museums were rated as excellent, and on Google they're rated 4.5 out of 5. So there is a bit of interrogation we've got to do around the household survey to understand the data output from that, and we propose to maintain focus on these 2 target areas over the next financial period. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr McKee. Are there any questions on that report? If not, the recommendations there for your agreement at 3.1. Thank you. Item 7 is the Housing Subcommittee, and for the appointment of members to this committee. The report seeks appointment of members to the Housing Subcommittee. The subcommittee deals with the determination of contentious applications for financial assistance for the repair or improvement of housing, and also appeals against homeless persons' determinations made under delegated authority. The chair of the Sustainable Development Committee is an ex officio member of the subcommittee, and the committee is invited to appoint 6 other members to the subcommittee, at least 2 of whom are members of the Sustainable Development Committee. So we can make appointments out with the committee as well. So can I call for nominations then for members of the Housing Subcommittee? Well, I would move the Vice Chairman, Councillor Norman MacDonald. Can I have a seconder for that? Mr. McInnes, thank you. Maybe we can get a wee spread, a geographical spread for the membership. Convener?
Councillor Ian MacLeod.
Thank you, Convener. Seconder for Mr. Mackenzie, seconding that nomination. So that's, we've got 3 of us so far. How many more do we need? Another 3?
Yeah.
Anyone from Mr. McInnes proposing the convener? Second, I'll second that. Any other nominations? Broad Bay area? Well, we've got Point and Cockatoo covered. So, Norman, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Yeah, I'd like to propose Councillor Francis Murray from the town.
Agreed, I'll second that. How many have we got now?
We need another 2.
Another 2 members required. Councillor McCoy is proposed by Councillor Mackenzie. Seconder. Gordon Murray is seconding that nomination.
I nominate Councillor Paul Finnegan.
I'll second that. Councillor McSween. Councillor Paul Finnegan. I think that's us now, up to.
Yep.
Great, thanks very much. Is that a legacy hand, Norman? Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, Ma. Thanks.
Okay, can I just confirm the
Yeah.
appointees?
Yes, Mary Sheena.
Okay, the chair is ex officio, Norman MacDonald, vice chair, so they're both members of SD. Ian M. MacLeod, the convener, Francis Murray, Ian M. Macaulay, and Paul Finnegan.
Agreed. Thanks very much. So as you know, housing and homelessness comes under this committee's remit now following disestablishment of the Communities and Housing Committee. So we're now going to move on to item 8, which is the Affordable Housing Update. This report provides an update of the Affordable Housing Programme, including details of developments delivered in the process or about to commence. Report highlights the challenges and the approaches currently being discussed with government to maximise the resource planning assumption in this programme. Section 6 of the report focuses on the rural Stornoway split and seeks consideration of the policy implications of maintaining the 45%, 55% target for rural urban building moving forward. The Cona agreed this split in September 2017, and since then, each SHIP, the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, has been prepared on that basis. A decision on this matter is not required today, and I'm suggesting, I know there might be some discussion on it today, but I'm suggesting that we again leave this for a more in-depth discussion at our August meeting or seminar, whatever we want to call it. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Ian Watson to speak to the report and answer any questions. Ian is the Housing Services Manager and heads up the Cona's Housing Services team. The team is based in the Communities Department and is responsible for the production of the local housing strategy, homelessness and general information and advice about housing issues. So Ian, I invite you to speak to the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you mentioned, the housing remit is now falling within the bounds of this committee, so we thought it would be a useful opportunity to highlight the affordable housing programme and just give members a bit of information on what it's all about, and also for the benefit of the new members of the council as well, so they can see what kind of activity we are engaged in providing new houses throughout the islands. So the report provides a wee bit of an overview of the affordable housing process. Every council is responsible for delivering affordable housing in their area, although they might not deliver the houses directly themselves, like in our own situation, as we are a stock transfer council, and we work very closely with Hebridean Housing Partnership, our main partners in affordable housing, and a number of other things. Tyne and Tregall, the local housing agency, are also actively involved in providing affordable housing on the island as well, and they work with the Corlia and HHP on a regular basis. Chair, you mentioned the SHIP, the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, and I'm sure that's something your committee will hear plenty about over the course of a year. This sets out the Corlia's proposals for a 5-year period where they'd like to see affordable housing built. We have to prepare a SHIP every year, and at the September meeting of the Corlia, we'll be presenting the next version of the SHIP for your consideration. The SHIP is informed by the amount of money that's available. The main chunk of funding comes from the Scottish Government. It's a resource planning assumption that sets out what money would possibly be available to a council area for the 5-year period. At the moment, we're working on a resource planning assumption of around about £43 million, which is a really good amount of money to have available for us. The funding, as Mr. McKeever, the director, mentioned, the funding is based around a benchmark figure. We don't get the whole amount of money for affordable housing. There's a benchmark of just over £90,000 available at the moment per unit. Although, as the director mentioned, the colleagues that we work with in the Scottish Government in Inverness are very supportive of the islands, and they have been willing to increase the benchmark figure on a regular series of occasions to help protect the funding of a particular housing development. So we're obviously very grateful to the support they provide us over the course of a year. The balance of the funding comes primarily from HHP. They borrow money and they contribute that towards the development, and they pay back the money they borrowed through the rental income. From time to time, the Corlia also contributes a small amount of money. This is primarily through the money we get from additional council tax that's collected, and we usually step in if there's a funding shortfall on a particular development with the money we have through what's called the Actish funding. And again, we'll look at that in more detail in September when we present the SHIP to the committee. The report also gives a wee bit of a breakdown on the current programme. Section 7 gives you an idea of the units at different stages of development. So you can see there's quite a bit of activity going on throughout the islands in terms of developing affordable housing. And I should mention that the affordable housing, it can be social rented housing, or it can be shared equity housing for first-time buyers. So we're always keen to see a range of tenure options being available for people. We thought it would be useful to highlight the developments that have been completed since 2017, and that's set out at 7.3. So you can see we've tried to make sure there's a good geographical spread of developments throughout the islands, and again, different sizes of houses and different tenure types. So there's a good range of choice available. The current SHIP that we're working on at the moment has a proposal for a further 100 houses over the 5-year period up to 2026-27. Again, that tries to have a good geographical spread of rural developments, as well as opportunities for developing the Stormont Town Centre Regeneration Initiative. We are also in ongoing discussion with the Scottish Government about the best way of spending the money that's available to us. We've had some constructive discussions with the officials and with the Housing Minister over the last year or so about how we could do things maybe a bit more innovatively on the islands. And the most recent discussions we've had have opened up opportunities for the council to potentially purchase land to set up a strategic land bank that could be used in coming years. And as we mentioned previously, we've also had some encouraging feedback about introducing an empty homes programme, trying to get some way of using the funding to bring long-term empty homes back into use, either for rent or for sale to first-time buyers or to young families. So these are two developments we're working on at the moment, and I'd imagine we'll be updating your committee on a regular basis about the progress with that. We also wanted to highlight a number of the challenges that we have in developing the affordable housing programme. The availability of land is a huge challenge for us just now. We're really struggling at the moment to find land in Uist, despite looking at quite a number of sites and carrying out feasibility studies. It has been very challenging to find land that either is physically capable of being developed and a development that would be affordable has to fit into it. The process we go through to identify land is done in partnership with HHP. We reach out to community landlords and to grazing committees on a regular basis. Our colleagues in planning also do a call for site from time to time to inform the housing land audit. And any land that is brought to our attention, we engage with the owners. And what we normally do is we carry out a desktop feasibility study, first of all, and that's carried out by our colleagues in asset management. That sets out the details of the particular site. And if there's potential for developing it further, then we move on to a second phase of more detailed feasibility. That's usually delivered, or it's usually led by HHP, and most of the feasibility studies are carried out by Tychen and Chagall. So the second stage feasibility is a much more detailed bit of work that involves trial pits and consultation with service providers to see if a piece of land is suitable for developing. We jointly share the costs of the feasibility studies with HHP. We're playing 50-50 at the moment. And that, again, the funding we have from that comes from the Actish funding, the council tax funding that we collect. So despite carrying out quite a number of feasibility studies over the last several years, it's still a real challenge finding land. One of the big issues also is decrofting land. Sites that have been identified as being suitable within crofting ownership have taken quite a long time to get decrofted. So that's obviously delaying spend on the programme, and it's quite a challenge for ourselves and HSP in trying to get over that hurdle. And the other major one we have is just the physical makeup of the land in the islands as well. We have huge problems with rock and peat, and that knocks out quite a lot of sites as well that can't be brought forward because of the physical constraints, which would require a huge amount of funding in order to make them work. So we keep a database of the land that we have looked at. Some sites might come back onto the agenda as time goes on, but we're always grateful for any hints or feedback of possible land that's out there, and we're happy to look at everything that's available. The final thing I just want to raise, you mentioned it yourself, Chair, and the directors mentioned as well, that was the rural-urban split that we have. This came into being in 2017 when we finished the last local housing strategy. It was felt that the majority of new affordable housing should be focused in rural areas. The main thinking behind that was to support fragile areas in terms of population retention and population growth. Prior to that, the focus had been on the demand throughout the islands. Stornoway and the surrounds had the biggest demand in terms of the waiting list that HSP keeps. So 60% of the new build was focused in and around Stornoway. But in 2017, when extra funding was made available from the Scottish Government, it was felt it was a good time to focus on rural areas. So it has been beneficial for rural areas. It does take longer to develop a rural site because of the issues we've mentioned previously. But it has helped in the initiatives of trying to retain population where at all possible. And the discussion around the rural-urban split is also influenced by the drawdown in the funding. Obviously, it takes a wee bit longer to draw down funding when you're looking at rural areas. The spend could be done quite quickly if everything was focused on Stornoway, but again, that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure there's a good spread throughout the islands. So, as you mentioned, the seminar, I think that'd be a really good opportunity to discuss that in more detail. Be really interested to get members' views on what they think about the split. So it'd be down to a balance between the focus on rural areas or maximising the money that's available for the council over the next 5 years. So that's the summary of the report that's before you, Chair. Like I mentioned, the SHIP will be brought to the committee in September, and that's usually a significant milestone in the development of affordable housing throughout the year. Happy to get questions that members might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins, for that comprehensive overview of the situation. Do members have any questions? Councillor Ian MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Not a member of the committee. I'm just thinking about how we approach grazing clerks for availability of land. I'm very aware that in my own area, grazing clerks are really, the meetings are non-existent for the last 10, 15 years, particularly the village I'm in. So would it be a better way maybe to approach crofters direct, maybe, rather than through grazing clerk? Try and get just about every community council meeting I go to in ward, the subject comes up of housing, and when I tell them there's no land available.
Norrie Thompson Shaw,
Norman, mute yourself, please.
You know, it keeps, this subject keeps coming back up, you know, and I don't know, it might be helpful to have a list of all the land that's been kind of subject already to checked or not suitable, you know, that's something I can take back and say, look, we are trying type of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, can you advise on engagement that's taking place in that regard? Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a wee bit of background on the engagement we've had with various bodies over the last few years. In the last 3 years, I think it is, we've had 2 approaches to all the grazing committees on the island. I remember now, it was 170 grazing committees, I think, if I'm right, throughout the whole area. The first request was just to see if they had land available that'd be willing to offer up. And we got maybe a third of the responses were ones that we were able to look at. As you mentioned, most grazing committees, housing is not high up the agenda, and it's not an issue that they would normally deal with. The feedback we got, like I said, it was around about a third of the grazers responded, and we did look at land there, and that brought a number of sites to our attention that we did feasibility studies on. And then a couple of years ago, we also got in touch with the grazing committees to find out a wee bit more about their own experiences of providing land within their own communities. We are aware that a number of grazings had done that over the years and sold it off to people from the community for housing plots, and that tended to be targeted towards young families or first-time buyers. So again, it was just to get some more information on the kind of process that grazing committees had gone through to provide land in their areas. But that in itself also highlighted a number of sites as well. We were able to look at these as well to see what was available. We also did a call for land about 3 years ago. Again, this is just an open call for anybody who had land that they had surplus or that was could be used for housing purposes. So we got a pretty good response to that. If I remember rightly, it's about 150 sites were brought to our attention, and we looked at all of these. But I think the balance of them weren't suitable either through the location or the physical makeup of the sites. But it was good to get that feedback from the community, and it's something we could revisit as well in the next year or so, just to see if there's any changes from that. We also engaged with the community landlords as well to see what local knowledge they can bring to the table in terms of land availability. So we work with them where possible. Basically, I think it's just we're open to any sites. You know, we're happy to look at any sites that are brought to our attention, and we do that in partnership with HSP to see what was out there. But it goes back to the challenges of land. It's just the issues we have of coastal flooding, the amount of rock, the amount of peat, and the location of land just makes it really challenging to find suitable land. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mr. MacLeod. Councillor Mustafa Hussain.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, Ian. Talking about the availability of land, I think from my previous forums, I think Youth Economic Task Force, we discussed that a few times. One of the issues that there was some lands available, but in a smaller scale, like we'll just take about the house of 2, which obviously increased the cost. But is that maybe an option that could be looked at in a way? Because if we're looking at land that will accommodate at least a minimum of 10 houses or something, that may be difficult. But I know that crofters and the state were happy to release small lands, different models. So is that? Can I just ask another question regarding the rapid rehousing strategy, for homeless strategies that we have? and looking at, especially for Houston Borough, is it maybe time that we should consider maybe some sort of a hostel to house people or individual that require rapid housing? Because at the moment, I find that, and it's anecdotal probably, data that I'm using, that there may be quite few individual occupying houses of 3 or 4 bedrooms that may be better released to families and maybe cheaper for to build some sort of similar to the acres that we have here, or something that will maybe host individuals instead of. Is that something? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the smaller sites for housing, that's something both ourselves and HSP would be happy to look at. Obviously, there's economies of scale come into the equation for taking that forward. But the approach that we've agreed with HSP is HSP would be happy to look at smaller developments as well, not necessarily the 10 or 12 units, but 4, 6 units might have more of a positive impact in a rural area than a larger development. So it's certainly something that we'd be happy to look at if a smaller site became available. And in terms of the second question you had about, particularly in regard to people occupying larger family homes, that's a common occurrence in the island. I think it's very much the culture locally is a home for life. We don't have the same movement within the housing market of people purchasing a smaller house and then buying a larger one as the family grows. And similarly, we don't have the same culture of downsizing. When the family move away, it tends to be the parents stay in the family home because it's the family home. There's so many ties built into the family home. Not many people want to downsize. It's just something that we've been aware of for a long, long time. It's very hard to encourage people to leave the family home and go into a smaller house when all the memories and connections are within that area. Although we are aware that HSP, in the most recent development of shared equity properties they did in Goathill Farm, back in the day, shared equity was focused on first-time buyers, usually young couples, young families who wanted to get on the property ladder. But the rules were relaxed slightly, which enabled older families, or older people rather, to purchase shared equity houses if they wanted. That way, they could sell the family home. It would free up a large family home on the market, and they would move into still an owner-occupied home, but a smaller property that was more suited to their needs. So we're hoping that HSP would continue to look at that particular model. But I think it's just down to the cultural position on the islands where it's a home for life, probably going back to the sort of the tradition of the Crofting grant to provide the home. People want to stay in it because all the family memories and the neighbours and the community are round about. So it's just something that's very, very hard to move away from that particular culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watson. Briefly, Mustafa.
Thank you, Ian. I was also referring to homeless occupancy in terms of vulnerable people that find themselves homeless. Most of the stock at the moment in the Houston Borough, it's at 3 bedrooms, 2 or 3 bedrooms. So we end up occupying individual end up occupying homeless that's inappropriate for them and costs extra heating and extra. So I was referring to see, is there any plans or something to build maybe new homeless accommodation that will be suitable for individuals instead of just occupying? Thank you.
Lorraine, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to explain, it's very hard to get the match with the individuals who require temporary accommodation and the requirement to provide temporary accommodation. So it's better for us to have larger houses in case we have a family presenting than it is to have lots of 1-bedroom houses, and then obviously they're not large enough for a family. So at the moment, yes, there are quite a number of single-person households living in 2-3 bedroom properties, but that can change at any given time. So we are trying to meet our duties by having larger properties, as it were, and we have a few one-bedroom properties too. But with regards to building something akin to the acres, when it comes to shared accommodation, it can be extremely problematic, and the government are actually wanting us to move away from shared accommodation as a whole. So in order to reduce some of the problems associated with it, it really requires staffing, and staffing comes at a substantial cost. So really the size of accommodation that would be needed to warrant staffing with the demand in Euston Barra wouldn't really match. And of course, obviously with rapid rehousing, the idea is that households will spend less time in temporary accommodation because they will be housed in their permanent accommodation much more rapidly. So therefore, hopefully, over the next number of years, if rapid rehousing works, then we will see the need for temporary accommodation reducing. That is the kind of overall one of the key, what's the word I'm looking for, outcomes of rapid rehousing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Okay, with Councillor Finnegan, then Councillor McInnes, and then the convener, and then we'll wind this item up.
Thanks, Chair. Not a member of me. Yeah, it was just to ask, if I remember rightly, in the last term, the 43 million, HHP had sort of stated that they didn't really have the resources to actually utilise all that money. And I know that the previous convener was looking very hard at, and others, at flexible options. And I just wondered how far that had got, or if it had got anywhere at all. They were speaking to Scottish Government about looking at flexible options. Thanks.
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Finnegan. Do you want to come in, Director Ian? Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, this is in relation to the balance of the RPA funding, the resource planning assumption funding that's available to the islands. In discussions with HHP last year when we were developing the ship, they felt they could deliver a programme of around about £25 million, and that left a balance of 14-15 million that we approached the Scottish Government about to see if we could use it more innovatively on the island. And there have been a number of proposals that we ran past the Cabinet Secretary and officials. And the feedback that we got was focused on the Empty Homes Initiative that I mentioned previously, and also the Strategic Land Bank. Some of the other proposals that we had suggested, the Scottish Government felt they were better suited through other schemes like the Rural and Islands Housing Fund, for example, where community bodies could bid into that to get funding for housing. So that the two areas they've asked us to focus on has been the empty homes and the Strategic Land Bank. But we had looked at a number of larger projects, but because they didn't totally comply with the framework of the Affordable Housing Programme, we didn't get the green light for these ones. But it's something that we'll keep in the back burner to see if there's any opportunities for taking this forward.
Thanks. I think there's still work for us to do around that in terms of we've got a rural homes fund and we've got a crofting grant scheme too, and we're working in silos. So there's bound to be some way in which we can focus on getting a scheme that works for addressing the rural housing situation that the previous convener has been championed for many years. And I think we should pursue that with government.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back?
Yes,
yeah, it was just to say to Ian that so is there a real danger here that we won't be able to spend all the money that's been given to us?
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, and this ties into the discussion we've had about the rural-urban split as well, where one of the key considerations that will come up at the seminar is about the potential of two opportunities. One is maximising the spend where at all possible, and that would tend to be easier to do if there was more of a focus on the Stornoway and surrounding area. But obviously that would be at the detriment of rural areas. So that's one of the things that would be good to tease out at the seminar about how to make the most of the money that's available, the £43 million, where at all possible. It would be good to be able to spend all that money, but we know that it's going to be challenging, even with maintaining the rural-urban split at the moment. But it's sort of normal in the process we go through. Some years we won't spend all the money. Other years we'll be able to draw down additional funding from the Scottish Government, and this has happened in the past. But I think this time round, just the scale of the money that's available to us is making it more of a challenge to maximise that spend. Yeah. But like you're saying, Chair, that the seminar will be a really good opportunity to tease that out in more detail.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Watson. No, I'll take Mr. McCulloch later. Mr. McInnes has been waiting, and then Mr. Convener, then Mr. McCormack will finish, wind up the site. Sorry, Mr. McInnes, you're not live. That's it.
Sorry, it's following on from what Ian was saying, and what are the particular additional costs in providing, a like-for-like property in a rural area compared to in the Stornoway area, and are there any geographical areas that are really more expensive than others?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is one that we've been, the issue of the differences in the cost to build throughout the island. It's something I've been aware of for a long, long time. Generally speaking, in and around Stornoway, you can develop affordable housing pretty close to benchmark figures. But we've found the further south you go down the island chain, the costs increase substantially. That's partly down to in some cases, there's not so many building firms available to contract or to bid for tenders in the further south you go. So HSP have noticed that the tender returns have been very substantial. There's also the issue of material costs as well. They increase the further south you go. So all that adds to the overall price of developing in a rural area. The price for land doesn't alter the further south you go. It stays pretty much the same throughout the Outer Hebrides. We haven't noticed a real increase over Ireland in Barra compared to other parts of the island. I think that the example we always refer to give an idea of the scale of the problem was, or the scale of the challenge rather, development in Barra. There were 6 units built, I think it's 3, maybe 4 years ago, and the cost per unit was close to £250,000 per house because of the challenges in building down there. The cost per unit up in Lewis would probably be maybe 130,000. So it's a substantial increase as you go further south. But this has always been the case, even when back in the day when we could build Kensington houses many years ago, it was the same issue. It was more expensive the further south you went. But I think some of the costs have come back in recent years have been really, really challenging. So a number of sites that looked really encouraging that could be developed just weren't able to get a green light from the Scottish Government because of the costs involved. And again, bear in mind that the Scottish Government officials have been really good at increasing the funding that we have are available to us. They've gone way above the benchmark figure in order to get developments on the ground. So we're obviously very grateful for that support. But it is hugely challenging the further south you go in getting a cost-effective development.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Watson. Convener.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ian Watson for his very comprehensive report. And I think he's probably going to know what I'm going to come out with here. We've got a scheme in our ward that's ready to go. The land issues have been sorted. They've got the planning permission for an 8-house scheme, but unfortunately, HHP won't give the funding for the scheme. It's a big issue. They claim that there's not a demand for housing in Ness. There was 6 houses built last year and they were snapped up right away. This is an 8-house scheme, and I think it's desperately needed in the area. And I wonder, Mr. Watson, is there anything we as a corner can do to try and get HHP to help? The contractor has, done as much as he can on this, but there is no funding available, and I don't see it on any future programmes either.
Thanks for highlighting that, Convener. I think it's something we could follow up after the meeting, perhaps out with the chamber to engage with HHP on this issue. Director? Okay.
Yeah, happy to take that forward, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Mr. McCormack, did you want to come in?
Very briefly, Chair, I just wonder when we come to discussing the rural Stornoway split, if there shouldn't be a third element to it. Stornoway at the minute is including areas like Laxdale and Sandwick and such like, and I understand why that is the case. And what I'm wondering is if there should not be a category for Stornoway town itself, because we really do need to encourage more people to live in Stornoway town centre in order to sustain the businesses that are there. So I just wondered if this might be part of the discussion at the seminar.
Okay, everything's on the table for Mr. McCormack, and we can certainly consider that as well. Any comments, Mr. Watson or Mr. McKeever?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It is an area we have been giving consideration to, and we do think that finding windfall sites in Stornoway Town Centre is a critical part of the strategy. So I think developing a bit more subtlety around the split may be the way to go, because there's some areas that are considered to be Stornoway, which you know Bath would never consider itself to be Stornoway, for example, but it is accommodated within the Stornoway housing market area. So we're just going to be a bit more thoughtful, I think, around about the split and around how the various categories we have. But certainly finding new sites and windfall sites in Stornoway Town Centre is a key part of the strategy.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much, members, for your input to that item. Finally.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was waiting for everyone else to finish before I put the light on. Sorry. Just in relation to the 45-55 split and the discussion at the theme MOG, I think a table showing the costs per unit, like in the different areas, would be really useful, just so people have a better awareness of how far above benchmark they are. So I think if just documentation that could come to the MOG would be useful. Thank you.
Noted. Absolutely. So the recommendations are there at 3.1 for your agreement. Item 9 is the housing need and demand assessment. Report details the housing need and demand assessment currently being undertaken by the Housing Services team. The assessment will assist policy decisions, new supply, the use of existing stock and the provision of housing-related issues services. It will provide long-run estimates of house needs and be the evidence base for the policy direction of the strategy and the local development plan. The set will propose that an elected member from this corner be appointed to the Housing Market Partnership for the duration of this work. The project timeline is detailed in appendix to the report. Angela Smith is the Housing Strategy Manager and another key member of the housing team, and she will speak to the report and answer any questions. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give you a quick overview of the housing need and demand assessment process and how it's tied to the local housing strategy. HINDA is the first step in the housing planning process and is designed to give broad, long-run estimates of current and future housing need, rather than precision estimates. Every 5 years or so, local authorities have to prepare an assessment of housing need and demand to provide an evidence base for the local housing strategy and the local development plan in terms of land use. The current HINDA was assessed as robust and credible back in 2018 by the Scottish Government Centre for Housing Market Analysis. And work has been underway for several months now on the next iteration, which we would hope to submit in the autumn to Scottish Government. There are several steps in the HINDA process, and I've outlined these at 6.3, I think, in the report. The most labour-intensive of these, I would say, is the gathering of available statistical data, evidence in terms of population, household growth, health data, productivity, and so on, to build up a socioeconomic picture of how we are living and working in the islands and how we will be living and working in the islands in the future. Once we have that picture, we can start running scenarios through the Scottish Government's HINDA tool. HINDA is the abbreviation of Housing Need and Demand Assessment. The HINDA tool is a series of spreadsheets pre-populated with a wide range of statistical data. And we can adjust it based on what we've learned ourselves, and we then arrive at an estimate of additional future housing units. And this is the final output in the HINDA exercise before submission to Scottish Government for assessment. If Scottish Government are happy with the HINDA, with the work that we've done, then the local housing strategy process can formally commence. The HINDA outputs are considered against policy aspirations such as population initiatives, economic drivers, national policy such as climate change targets and our statutory homelessness duty, and other factors that underpin housing development such as the capacity of the local building industry, the building trade, and as my colleague alluded to, the availability of land. When we've considered these things, we will arrive at a housing supply target. And you'll see various reports coming back through member officer working groups and to committee, and you'll see that the estimate of additional future housing units and the housing supply targets are likely to be quite different because the housing supply target has policy applied to it. The Scottish Government requires us to put a housing market partnership for the preparation of the HINDA and the LHS in place in order to give a platform for consulting widely with relevant stakeholders and to draw on as many views as possible. So at the beginning of the year, we invited a cross-section of colleagues, housing and planning colleagues, internal colleagues and external stakeholders to be a part of the housing market partnership, and these are detailed at 7.1 in the report. The core group consists of housing and planning and the remainder is the stakeholder group. It's desirable and appropriate that an elected member from the Sustainable Development Committee also sits on the Housing Market Partnership, as the HINDA and the LHS will be overseen by the Sustainable Development Committee and the Housing Member Officer Working Group. So we're seeking appointment today from this committee. The first meeting of the Housing Market Partnership will take place next Tuesday, which is the 20th of June, from 2 to 4, and it'll be over Teams. We would anticipate meeting approximately once a month or as appropriate until both the HINDA and the LHS processes are completed. And there's an indicative time frame at Appendix 1 for your reference. And I think that's all I have to say, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Angela, for that overview. Any questions from members? Okay, so I'd like to call for nominations for the appointment of a member of the Sustainable Development Committee to sit on this partnership group. I would like to nominate Councillor Hussain. Agreed. Any other nominations? Okay, so thanks very much. Do members agree to note the report and agree the appointment of Councillor Mustafa Hussain to this group? Agreed, thank you. Now move on to item 10, that's the medical adaptations budget. The report provides an update on the COLA's capital programme medical adaptations budget. The scheme provides grant funding to homeowners to fit adaptations to meet the person's medical needs and is delivered locally through a partnership arrangement involving the IGB's occupational therapy service, the local care and repair service and the COLA's housing services team. To date, 470k of additional funding has already been redirected towards the budget, and this report seeks authority for the Director in consultation with IGB to continue to explore potential funding opportunities and report back to the next meeting of the committee. And Ian Watson is available to answer any questions. Any questions, members, on that item? Councillor Hussain and then Leader. That's you.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, maybe I should bring this with Mr. Watson after. It was regarding a constituent that obviously raised the question with us with a child that's severely disabled. And
if it is an individual case,
it's an individual
Mustafa,
case, maybe I should bring
speak to Ian
okay.
afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would just comment in support of the recommendation to look at potential funding opportunities that are out there. I think it's a really important and potentially life-changing piece of work that's done by this medical adaptation budget. So, yeah, I think it's really good that that recommendation's in there.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else at the moment? No? Okay, thank you. Members agree with recommendation 3.1. Thank you. We move on to item 11 now. It's the consultation on the prevention of homelessness duties. The report provides information on the joint Scottish Government and COSLA consultation on the prevention of homelessness duties. Responses were invited by 31st March 22, but with the final series of meetings of the last term of the COLA. Therefore, homologation is sought of the COLA's response submitted at the end of March. Lorraine Graham, as you have heard from before, is the Homeless Services Manager and heads up the COLA's Homeless Support Service in the Housing section and is based in the Communities Department. Homeless support officers are located in both Stornoway and Ballybannagh, providing support for households anywhere in the Western Isles. And Lorraine will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give a wee bit of background. In 2017, the Scottish Government established the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Group to look at recommending solutions for ending homelessness in Scotland. And they ended up making 70 recommendations. And one of those key recommendations was to create duties for preventing homelessness from happening in the first place. So on the back of that, a prevention review group was formed. And they brought forth recommendations which were published in February last year. And two of these key recommendations centred around the fact that homelessness prevention should be a duty for all public bodies, and also that the existing 2 months, at the moment, anybody who's threatened with homelessness within the next 2 months, the local authority has a duty to assist them to try and prevent homelessness from happening, but it was recommended that that be extended to 6 months. So the government then went out with COSLA to consultation, and there were quite a number of questions around the recommendations that were made and the full responses given at the appendix. But just to condense the COSLA's response, basically, we agreed with the majority of the recommendations that were made, with the caveat that several times we expressed concern at the resources that would be required, the significant increase in resources that would be required to implement the full recommendations. So the consultation responses are due to be published in the autumn, and we will await the outcome of that to see if legislation is forthcoming to prevent homelessness. Obviously, homeless prevention is an ideal. As has already been mentioned, we had 152 presentations in the Western Isles last year. But with the best will in the world, it isn't possible to prevent homelessness in every instance. The majority of homeless presentations here and throughout Scotland are as a result of relationship breakdown or being asked to leave by a friend or relative. So yeah, we do support on the whole the principles, but have concerns about the resources that would be required in order to implement the full recommendations. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members? Okay, very good. Thanks very much for that. And the recommendation 3.1, your agreement. We'll move on now to item 12, Development Plan Scheme 2022. Report seeks approval of the Development Plan Scheme. The DPS is subject to annual review and publication and sets out the proposed programme processes for preparing and reviewing the Corners Development Plan. Once approved, it will direct the work programme for the Development Plan team, and in line with regulations will be published and made available online and submitted to Scottish ministers. Planning reform and implementing the Planning Scotland Act and subsequently secondary legislation has placed additional duties on planning authorities and will put in place a number of changes for all aspects of planning, which will impact on the planning services, developers, applicants and the wider public. And we mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting. Mary McKeever is a Development Plan Manager based in the Communities Department in Stornoway, and Mary will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out our annual statement of development planning activity to deliver and maintain the development plan. In the forthcoming year, we aim to continue to update and review supporting planning policy to underpin the development plan. As with many things in development planning, of course, is the policy side of planning. The publication of the development plan scheme is a statutory duty and is prescribed. There will be 2 work streams running in the current year: work to maintain and keep up to date the current development plan, and secondly, preparatory work under the new development plan for the new development plan under legislation emanating from the 2019 Planning Act. COVID has and continues to impact on our team and the wider planning service due to staff absence, more protracted stakeholder working, and the different approaches to public and community engagement and collaboration, which of course is a key aspect of our work. As noted earlier in the committee and by Chair, the new duties under the 2019 Act and a heavy and complex caseload without additional resources is and will put significant pressure on the whole of the planning service. Happy to take any questions on the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, very much for that. Any questions from Mary? We'll be having plenty of discussions around the development plan going forward, especially around the housing needs. Vice Chair.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair, and thanks for that, Mary. We had in a recent, or certainly last session's Planning Applications Committee, a situation where we overturned, I think, an original decision, or we voted to accept a decision with regard to the linear settlement plan. The linear settlement plan that was in the original our development plan. So we were basically voting against what was in the plan. Now, I've had several applications from folk who have been turned down because of the linearity, is there such a word as the linearity of their development, because it's outside the normal linear plan of a village, which has been turned down, and it's going back to appeal again. And I think we've had several discussions about this, and it would need possibly for us to change the plan to make it easier for people to build in their own villages without going through this convoluted process of applying our own planning department, applying the plan and the regulations correctly and turning somebody down and then be overturned on appeal. At what point can we actually go forward, and maybe when's the next stage when we can actually maybe accommodate this better in the plan, so we're not actually making more work for the planning department, unnecessarily more work for the planning department, and allowing locals to build houses within their own village, possibly outside of the linear aspect of the village. At what time and when maybe can we actually look at the plan again and maybe constitute a new plan going forward? It probably would ease work within the department as well.
Yeah. Well,
that work is imminent, Mrs. MacDonald, in terms of reviewing and preparing for the next plan. So, you know, that can be addressed in future discussions. But I'll let Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. The development plan stands as is, and we are bound by that policy framework. And just to remind members that is the coreless stated planning policy, and we would look for members to have ownership of that plan. And as you noted yourself, you've been in that quandary in the local review body and planning applications board, where you're having to make, or you've been asked to, or you're being pressured to make decisions against that, contrary to the development plan, the stated policy framework. So as Chair noted, going forward, we will be undertaking to prepare a new development plan, but that's a period, a piece of work that will go over several years to have then a new adopted policy framework. But the merits of the new local development plan will be the scope to undertake interim reviews of sections of the plan, so you will not be bound to the whole of the plan for a 5 or 10 year period. Currently we're bound to it for 5 years, and yes, it has there has been a number of cases have tested the plan and the policy framework. So under the new, once we have a new adopted plan in place, which will, that the lead in on that is over a number of years, there will be scope for us to undertake reviews of sections of the plan rather than being bound by the whole of it. So as noted in this report, preparing for the new plan is a key work stream for us going forward. We hope to undertake a series of workshops, sessions with members around issues like siting, design, the spatial strategy, which is what's perhaps curtailed some decisions in the eyes of members.
Thanks for that, Mary. Yeah, I think we're certainly setting precedents so that you know, maybe it's going to point to how the Coroner are viewing, or certainly the previous planning board were viewing that particular part of the development plan, and hopefully, you know, the changes will accommodate and make things easier for everybody. Thank you.
It's just a timely reminder, though, that decisions and the planning process are plan-led, and decisions should be made in line with the development plan. So that really emphasises the importance of getting that right, and for members to have ownership and be happy with that.
Okay, thanks very much both for that. Recommendations are at 3.1 for your agreement. Item 13 is a response to the consultation, the Electricity Act 1989 applications fees. The report advises members of the process for determining applications made under this Act and seeks agreement to submit a response to the Scottish Government consultation on the fee scale of these applications. In accordance with the Scheme of Administration, the Committee was asked to take powers to approve the response, which is required to be submitted prior to the Coroner sitting on the 29th of June. Morag Ferguson is Planning Manager and Head of Planning Services. Morag is based in Ballyvanich and will speak to the report and answer any questions. Hi, Morag.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'll keep this brief. For the benefit of new members of the Coroner, and just by way of overview, the Government undertakes wide consultation on proposed changes to or the introduction of new planning and planning-related regulations. This report sets out some information on the background to and provides a brief draft response to a consultation on a Government proposal to increase the fees levied on developers for applications made to Scottish ministers under the Electricity Act. These applications are for large-scale wind farms, hydro-generating stations and high-voltage lines in excess of 132 kilovolts, and cases that are brought to the Coroner for their review following consultation by Government are generally for developments of significant scale. There are only 4 brief consultation questions to respond to, and the main point being made in consultation response is that the Coroner acknowledge and support the proposals in the consultation, and in particular support the proposal to have a separate fee scale for environmental impact assessment applications, given the significant additional work involved in assessing these applications. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Morag. Are there any questions from members? If not, we can agree the recommendations at 3.1. Thank you, Morag. Item 14 is the Renewable Energy Update. The report provides an update of the current position in relation to a range of renewable energy matters that the Coroner is currently engaged in, and seeks the Coroner's support for the proposals for energy transition in order to deliver decarbonisation through onshore wind, Scotland offshore wind and green hydrogen production for the local use and export, whilst maximising community benefit potential for any development. Mr. John Cunningham, Strategy Manager based in the Chief Executive's Department and is the Lead Officer on Energy and Renewables, and will speak to the report and answer any questions. Mr. Cunningham.
Thanks, Chair. It's an update report, and returning members will be well aware of the content of the report. It's really for the benefit of new members to update them as to where we are in our work on various aspects of renewable energy. The report outlines the regulatory framework that we're working within, our existing electricity network, the proposed network from 2027 when the transmission link finally arrives. It talks about onshore wind, and in there it refers to a very successful community sector who are generating 21.5 megawatts of community-owned energy supported by the Coroner, and we continue to work with them to maximise opportunities for connection. Talks about Scotland offshore wind and the work we're doing on green hydrogen and its derivatives. The recommendation is, Chair, that this new Coroner continues to support that agenda as we move towards this energy transition in the islands. As you said in your opening remarks, Chair, the previous 4 or 5 Coroners have been engaged in preparatory work, and this is really the delivery term for a lot of these items. So looking for continued support from members, always with the emphasis on community benefit. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John, for your report, which as ever is very comprehensive. There's just an emphasis in it that I would like to see if you wouldn't maybe address going forward in relation to community renewables. And you have made reference to the difficulties that community renewables are facing at the moment in terms of other new communities coming online. It's just impossible to do so just now. So I'd like to know what we are doing to address that. I'm not necessarily suggesting you can tell me all that today, but maybe at some point in the future we could look at just exactly how we can make changes to the whole business of the different types of ways in which theoretically electricity goes along wires, so that the local people can benefit from that. We're looking, I know you're looking to find some way in which we can reduce the cost of energy to our local people, for example, and that, from my way of thinking, would best be done through community renewables. I may be wrong in that thinking, but that seems to me. And I'd also like us to look at how we export electricity from our islands. It seems to me that given if all of these developments come ahead that you've got here, there was not going to be any room on the big interconnector for community renewables. And I do know that Ofgem were very sympathetic to the idea of building a second interconnector to Skye, for example. And is it worth our while pursuing that on behalf of community renewables, for example? So because the dividends from community renewables are significant, and I know there's lots of other kind of dividends from multinationals in terms of jobs and so on, but the direct dividends to communities from community renewables are significant. And we can enhance these if we can increase the number of community renewable wind farms that are available. I do understand that perhaps a lot of the way I'm thinking just now is going to depend on the UK and Scottish governments taking a more positive attitude towards community renewables and indeed renewables in general. And I just wondered if you could possibly advise at some point in the future of just what all the implications are around that and how we can address these matters. And the one final thing I wondered if you could address, I know that quite a number of the community renewables wind farms at the moment are trying to be involved in hydrogen and battery projects. Either collectively or individually. And I think we could benefit if we were all working together on these issues. I would hate to think that at some point there would be cross purposes between what the multinationals were going to do and local developers were going to do. I'd like to maximize the benefit for our islands, I think is really what I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Chair, I think that a lot of the questions here could be covered in the seminar we have in August in a bit of detail. We can bring a lot of information back. Just very quickly, Chair, we are working on a battery solution which might equalise local generation with local consumption. We are lobbying hard for a 600 megawatt cable which could accommodate some community generation, and we'll find out on the 30th of June whether the Offshore Transmission Network Review is going to recommend another cable, an even larger cable. So we'll have that information for the seminar. And we are developing the net zero hub at Arnish, which has been mentioned in the report. And we do hope to access community generation to even constrained generation to support that project.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to bring up, I know that Mr. Cunningham mentioned community benefit. It's very important given the impact, the visual impact that the N4 wind farm is going to make, and we need to really maximise community benefit. So can I ask what political engagement have we been exploring in terms of talking to the government to maximise our benefit?
Can I come in there just now? Can you defer that question to the next item, Mr. Murray, because it's read Scotland.
No problem. Yeah. Okay, well, I've asked the question, so you can come back.
Well, you can think about it when you.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions on this particular item in the update? If not, we agree the recommendations there at 3.1. So we now move to the item 15, the Scotland offshore wind and related matters. The report provides an update on the current status of this leasing decision around out at Harbour and seeks authorisation to commission a feasibility study which will help the islands secure the most benefit from the deployment of offshore wind around the islands. And again, John Cunningham will speak to the report and answer questions from members.
Thanks, Chair. As you said, it's a briefing on the Scotland project. It provides background to the Scotland areas, how they were devised, how they were approved, background to the Scotland developers, grid connection options. It's all in the report. Just on Councillor Murray's question on community benefit, the challenge we're facing in the offshore environment is that community benefit is not legislated for. In the onshore environment, we can ask developers to sign a Section 75 legal agreement alongside their planning permission, which ties them into a certain amount of content locally. There's no such provision in the marine environment, which means that any community benefit is essentially voluntary. Councillor Murray asked about political engagement. The decision there lies with Marine Scotland, part of the Scottish Government, who, when they consent these projects, possibly have the capability to look into community benefit. So along with Community Energy Scotland and HIE, we are talking to Marine Scotland to see if there's a way, when these schemes are consented in 2025-26, can there be a condition around community benefit that strengthens the work? We've already done a lot of work on this through the Memorandum of Understanding, but that is voluntary at the moment, so we'd hope to make that mandatory really in 2025-26.
I'm just going to bring in the Chief Executive in just now before I come back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to Mr. Cunningham's comments there, in addition to the good work that has been done with these memoranda of understanding, and that was very far-sighted work, the subject is also, as you will know, the subject of much debate within COSLA, between COSLA and island local authorities, between COSLA and island local authorities and government, because this is a key issue when one goes back to the Smith Commission and the statements about commitments for development and distribution of Crown Estate revenues for the purpose of Crown Estate legislation itself. These are political issues as well as financial and organisational, and in parallel to what is happening here with developers, these arguments are being pursued through COSLA, and the leader will no doubt update on that in due course.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Certainly pursue further engagement. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come back? I was meaning more in terms of Scottish Government ministers and senior councillors of the CORLA engaging and making representations in a political environment rather than officials. Now, when was the last time that took place?
Chief Executive, Deputy Chief Executive, Director, whatever they call you now.
Thank you, Chairman. Mostly they call me Callum. I can't recall off the top of my head what the date of the last engagement, but certainly the leader of the colony in the previous administration, myself and the leader met with a range of politicians, both in Scottish Government and UK Government. It was helpful. I can dig out to go back through diaries to outline these dates. But there has been political engagement with both governments over the term of the last Congress, and I would anticipate that that would continue. You'll have heard me earlier saying that that there is going to be important decisions coming up over the next period, and I was suggesting that both the council leader and the chairman of the committee may want to engage with governments again over the next period.
Do you want to follow up, Chief Executive?
Just to add to that, during the pre-election period, the chief executives of the 3 islands councils wrote to the minister in anticipation, in line with council policy, and in anticipation of our current councils continuing our wish to pursue these matters. So the ground is set for a meeting post summer with the relevant cabinet secretaries. There are actually 3 involved in this. There's the cabinet secretary for rural affairs. There's Michael Matheson, whose title I've forgotten temporarily, and there's also, of course, the cabinet secretary for finance. So it's between or among 3 areas within Scottish Government. So the ground is set for a meeting of the newly elected leaders and indeed chairs of development committees. And when Ms. Goujon was here for the opening of the commissioning of the deep water port, she indicated to me her officials would be very willing to arrange such a meeting. So we'll do that now that we're all back up and running. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Smiley, thank you. Councillor John A. McKeever.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding the ScotWind project and the danger that it bypasses the islands altogether and that the interconnector for that goes to Dunray. Could the feasibility study look at the possibility of all groups getting together and that our on land ones here, that the interconnector would join up with the ScotWind connector to Dunray, which would save an awful lot of money having the infrastructure in place, between, all the way to Bewley from here. It's a possibility that if they got together and worked together, that it could save a lot of money and it would give us an interconnector for community benefit for the islands.
Director.
I think there are a lot of issues that now can be explored given the advent of ScotWind and what that brings. So I think that is something that is worth exploring. I think what we'd have to take into consideration, however, is that all the work for the 600 megawatt connection has been done. There is a needs case sitting with Ofgem, which probably needs refreshed. The onshore developers probably want to be in construction as soon as possible. If they get their CFD and the needs case goes ahead, they will be looking to be building out over the next 2 or 3 years, whereas ScotWind is a much longer term proposal. So if we moved from a 600 megawatt to a Dunray solution, that would probably push the terrestrial developers back, a significant number of years. And I just don't think, given how long they've been working at these projects, they would want to sacrifice falling back, significant numbers of years before developing their own project. Their CFD, will have a certain number of years within it. So the longer it takes them to begin getting into operation, that they're probably going to start, having impacts on their CFD. So I think there are ideas to explore around this, but I think it may be difficult for the onshore developers to wish to move their connection dates back.
This is in the scenario that the CFD is not favourable. This is an option that we could look at to try and get something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Councillor Fraser and then Councillor John Allen MacLeod.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Not a member of your committee. I just wish to mention of the community meeting we held in Uig a couple of weeks ago. I wish to put on record my thanks to Mr. Cunningham for attending that meeting of the Uig Community Council on behalf of the Colia. Now, that meeting attracted a substantial attendance, and it was very clear from the viewpoints expressed that there are initial concerns relating to some of the conceptual ideas surrounding the development of Site N4. Now, going forward, I believe that Northland Power have to and must do more in informing all their communities in the western seaboard of Lewis of their development intentions. And when we discuss the options of community feedback, the representations which I have been receiving tell me that in real terms, community feedback should employ an element of energy dividend for our communities, particularly in light of current rising energy costs, domestically and globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. I think we can all agree. Thanks for reminding me to thank Mr. Cunningham for representing the Cora and the committee at that meeting in Nuge. Do you want to come back on anything Mr. Fraser said, Mr. Cunningham?
Thanks, Chair. I think we've taken on the concerns of the community. It was a very well attended meeting and excellent engagement with the community. And I think through the reports here, we're taking on board the concerns. Northland have made that point themselves. They're nervous about going too early on benefits in case they can't deliver them. And then on the other hand, if they don't mention benefits, people believe there are no benefits. So I spoke to them yesterday and they're kind of struggling with that balance just now. But they did commit to getting back to the West Side estates and to the communities with a firmer presentation on possible benefits going forward. And part of that will include possibly donation of electrons or donation of electricity for hydrogen production locally. That would be one of the benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. And the recommendation reflects the concerns that were raised at that meeting. Any other comments, Rob? Councillor McInnes? That's you.
Yes, Chair. I think, what we have in front of us with the Scotland round is an excellent opportunity for us as a corner and the communities to make sure that they grasp this opportunity and that we get the maximum economic linkage back to the communities. If we don't do that, it'll be a missed opportunity and it'll go somewhere else. And if I look back at the other communities that were remote communities, say doing way back in the early 60s, they got a generation of benefit from what people were saying, this will happen and that will happen. And it just reformed that community. And looking at the marine environment, we're in discussion with Marine Scotland over a long time prior to the granting of the licenses, and clearly there will be displacement of fishing activity, which was similar to what was being proposed for aquamarine power off Barvas not so long ago, and a license was issued there. And obviously we see that there are opportunities, and we have discussed it with the developers that in return for losing some fishing ground, that the community should benefit, and that should be in the form of community quota, which the local authority already operate on some species. So if we do get community quota or funding towards more, there will be benefit for the whole community of the Western Isles. In addition to that, the ground that will be lost will be mostly lobster ground, because it's mostly mobile species that are on those inshore grounds. And the most loss will be on a lobster fishery. So we see that in the earlier discussions we had with Aquamarine Power, they were very mindful and supportive of a lobster stock enhancement programme, which is available and can be done, and enhance all the other grounds, so that though they're losing on one ground, they can get additional benefits in other area. And in addition to that, when we're looking at, the whole community and the benefits that can come from it, the local authority have a revolving fund on which the fisheries investment scheme has been developed over many years. And infrastructure and other things can benefit. So I think collectively, if we have a vision how the communities can benefit and the economic linkage can be well used, I think it would be a missed opportunity on not making sure that we do get that maximum benefit. And like any new development, there'll be a lot of folk that may have wrong misconception of what's being proposed. But the direction of travel is hydrogen and the way forward with net zero. So we saw an excellent presentation last week from Stornoway Port Authority that have grasped the opportunity with partners in taking forward their vision of what can be achieved with all partners working together. And I think as we move forward as a corner, we should continue to support the previous councils and their enthusiasm for making sure that renewables do feature in the way forward. And we as a corner, as we heard, this is the term that it's likely to happen, and we shouldn't miss the opportunity and take the communities with us.
Can I agree more, Mr. McInnes? This is the delivery phase for us in terms of renewables, and we have to pursue the developers to maximise the community benefit to our communities. Okay, thanks for your contributions on that item. Sorry. Who's that? Oh, sorry, John Norman. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you were talking about me there, but thank you. And thanks, John, for the report you gave us there. Thanks a lot. I just want to mention a couple of things. A question about 10.2 firstly, and the second was just a statement. It's about the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. I'm just wondering, has this been sort of signed up by all these states, or was it a verbal agreement? That's the first question I've got. The other one was more a statement about they say about low electricity cost. They would give us sort of low cost electricity. Well, to be honest with you, with the impact this is going to have, especially over the west side of Lewis, and I mean, we're talking only 3 miles from shore, and the height of them, I mean, it's more or less on our doorstep. It really is. So as for low cost, to be honest, I would be looking for free electricity through the whole of the Western Isles. Now, that might sound pie in the sky, but not if we all stick together and say, this is what we want. And that would rid us of fuel poverty, and good chance it would rid us of poverty. So I would like to see at least that free electricity in the Western Isles, because there is a lot of opposition over our way. And following on from what Ronald was saying there seems to be a lot of opposition up the UK area and all, obviously because it's right on our doorstep. So thank you.
Thanks for your statement, Mr. MacLeod. Now I'll ask Mr. Cunningham to answer your first question.
Thanks, Chair, and Councillor MacLeod. Sorry.
Are you on now?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The Memorandum of Understanding, in that process we dealt with the West Side Estate Group, which is a kind of loose association of 5 landowning estates on the west side, and it was signed by one of the estates on behalf of all 5. So it's in the name of the West Side Estate Group. I don't think the estates signed individually, but it was signed on their behalf by one representative. And then on the issue of free electricity, it is of course our target that we would aim to get free electricity, and we will try to do that within regulatory constraints. Ofgem might have something to say about market distortion, so it might not be achievable in full, but it's certainly our target is to get the cheapest possible or even free electricity if we can, because it's a small amount of our peak demand is 29 megawatts. And when you think these schemes are producing 2.835 gigawatts, it's just peanuts really. But the blockage might be Ofgem and the regulatory framework.
Thank you very much for that and your contributions to that item and recommendation 3.1. Okay, Mr. McSween. Wind up this item.
John an rútur mar svon kutter mach son hator buodig ham smyn go iawn hadde seth na miels in blion na roin agus ham smyn go wel a jet mach go fashi fusrige karst amach gon koin snokken greshin rútus kutter miche ham smyn go wel gnik sho dort agus gefeim si jenne kein joch ma hat all dort go fashi bo noch geschar son na helan agus na ski den aking ach I'm saying it's here to make Jenna Kane just gefashing if it's a cash to make it in.
You change your cornish and max wine, the whole round of the command doing beyond the have shot as conotrig could your fashing if I'm going to question I go in the muir for sure. Okay, recommendations at 3.1 there.
What's happened to it?
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. I'll repeat that. Item 16, Scotland's future catching policy consultation. Report seeks agreement to homologate the coroner's response to the Marine Scotland consultation on this policy. Consultation deadline was 7th of June, and this, of course, fell out with the committee cycle, and the coroner's response is appended to the report. Pete Middleton, the Economic Development Officer of Fisheries, based in the Community Department, and he will speak to the report. And good to see you, Pete.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Chair. It's quite a broad approach to developing fisheries management in Scotland, part of the Marine Scotland's fisheries management strategy. It identifies specific fleet segments and proposes initial measures to try and develop and improve those sectors. I mean, some of the developments that are proposed have already been introduced in the Outer Hebrides, such as the pot limitation scheme. It's on trial at the moment, and remote electronic monitoring on scallop vessels, which I think is an indication of the industry support to be part of a sustainable, well-managed fishery. As you said, the response has already been submitted, but any significant amendments could still be added to it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any observations? We're happy to agree the recommendations and go forward with a consultation response. Thank you. Item 17 is enhancing sustainable fisheries management, remote electronic monitoring consultation. Report seeks agreement to homologate a coroner response to the remote electronic monitoring consultation. Again, this fell out with the committee cycle, and the coroner's response is detailed in the appendix to the report. I must stress that the local fisheries has always embraced sustainable fishing and will seek to pick this up further in the next report. And Pete is here to answer any questions on that. Any questions? Did you have your hand up, Mr. McInnes? Yeah, okay. Councillor McInnes.
No, it's just a lot of those papers are following on from what we as an industry have been looking at for quite some significant time, and a lot of it follows on from a meeting the coroner did have with Marine Scotland, at which Councillor Robertson was there, and the need for getting more accurate information available on where actual fishing vessels had been operating. And following on from that meeting, Marine Scotland took what the coal and industry highlighted as concerns, and they put their own officials up to Denmark to have a look at how fisheries were managed there. And on the back of that, local vessels here pioneered and trialled those remote electronic systems. And this is the fruits of what has been a long campaign to get this in place. The only thing that highlighted is that as we move forward, there may have been segments of the industry, and particularly what Pete's saying, that have been segmented, that we don't fail to recognise that things have changed locally here, particularly as stocks recover with global warming and we're seeing additional species coming in and possibly recovery in the herring fishing, that the traditional industries we did have there, that there will be an opportunity for us to reclaim that as stocks recover. And this should give us the opportunity to make sure that we don't lose out in the future.
Absolutely. Mr. McInnes, thank you for your expert observations on that. Any other observations or comments? No? Okay, the recommendations are there for the agreement at 3.1. Now, item 18, very important issue 2. Sound of Barra proposed fisheries management measures update. The report provides an update on the current Marine Scotland position, proposed fisheries management measures for the Sound of Barra Special Area of Conservation. The permanent closure of the Sound of Barra to scallop dredging would have a devastating impact on the local economies of both Euston and Barra, and this has been subject to previous discussions and representations to the Fisheries JCC. As stated earlier, the local industry has been actively involved in developing the REM on scallop vessels on the basis of a level playing field approach, and it is strongly held view that there should be no ban until the results of the REM are available, and I would advocate that strong representations are made to that effect to Marine Scotland, and we will do so following the agreement of this recommendation. Pete will answer any questions.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add to the report was that in 2.2 on the summary, that it seems to be from the surveys that Nature Scott have done 2016 and 18 that that's the final piece of information that they needed for Marine Scotland to propose the ban on bottom contacting gear in the Sound of Barra. And as you said, I would certainly be looking for further engagement with Marine Scotland to at least suspend or abandon the fisheries management measures until the results of the remote electronic monitoring from the vessels in relation to the features comes back.
Yes, thank you, Peter. I think with the committee's permission, we will write to Marine Scotland to reiterate that position with your agreement. Okay, thanks very much. Duncan McInnes.
Just the only additional comment I'd make to the Sound of Barra. Some councillors were saying, that we're waiting 5 years for something. This has been ongoing since the last century. Yes, since 1998. So we're talking about something that's been ongoing for that length of time. And now we're reaching the crossroads where a decision has to be made. And in this very chamber, Marine Scotland and Nature Scott were putting across reasons why things should go on, and they clearly hadn't done the proper assessment. As Pete alluded to, Nature Scott seemed to have done some survey work in the area. What we do know is that this area has been fished sustainably for the last 50 years. The features that they want protected are still there, and there is no mention anywhere that an island's community's impact assessment has been done, and that needs to be done. And what they tend to do is not recognise the geographical and additional costs that are involved in making vessels go to other areas, and in fact that the carbon footprint will be much larger. So I think it's very important as we move forward that we get that impact assessment and done independently, I would say, to recognise all the special circumstances in relation to Euston and Barra that are so dependent on having access to those stocks that they've had for the last 50 years.
Yeah, thank you. So, any councillor seen?
I would just like to put more weight on what Councillor Duncan McInnes was saying about an impact assessment, especially to the businesses around the Euston Barra, because of the direct effect of
Okay, thanks very much, everyone, for your contributions. And Pete, thank you. Recommendations of 3.1 for your approval. Item 19 now is the Civic Government Scotland Act 1982 licensing for short-term lets. Under the revised scheme of administration, licensing issues now fall under the remit of the new Community and Community Safety Board. This report was considered and agreed at the board yesterday. However, given the economic impacts of the proposals, it will also be considered by this committee. And the report provides an update on the licence of short-term lets and seeks approval for the basic framework of the proposed licensing scheme, which all local authorities are required to have in place by October this year. A report to the March series introduced the licensing of short-term lets. Order 2022 was approved on 19th of January this year and authorised delegation to the Director of Communities to manage and develop the scheme. Colm Fraser, Consumer Environmental Service Manager, is based in the Communities Department and will speak to the report and answer any question. Colm heads up a team of officers based in Stornoway and Ballabany that deal with food safety, trading standards, environmental health, animal health and welfare and licensing. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief. It's basically, as you highlighted, the scheme has to be in place by the 1st of October. So this is to give members a chance to see what the proposed scheme looks like and to make any comments so we can take into account before we develop it any further. We have kind of got provisional fees within the report, and it's planned that it will be a 3-year licence. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. Any questions from Mr. Fraser on that item? Happy to agree the recommendations. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Fraser. Item 20 is the National Strategy for Economic Transformation. The report provides information regarding the Scottish Government's recently published National Strategy for Economic Transformation and seeks agreement to refresh the local economic recovery strategy to align with the NSET. And the Director will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, this is the Scottish Government's new agenda for economic transformation in Scotland over the next 10 years. It is a very high-level document. It is a visionary document with a lot of interesting direction of travel in it for Scotland. I think there is good resonance with some of the things that we want to do locally. If you look at 5.5, some of the main opportunities coming through NSET, they've got real resonance with our economy. I do put a bit of commentary, policy commentary at section 6 around the strategy. There are elements within the strategy where we've got to understand a bit more. There are 77 or so programmes and actions of activity to be taken forward, and there are delivery plans being worked out for each of these. I think it's disappointing that local government hasn't been involved in the development of these delivery plans. And I think one of the things that the Regional Economic Partnership wants to do is for the Chairman to write to government suggesting there should be a greater role for local government in the development of the delivery plans. All that said, there is opportunity in NSET, and I think we've got to work and find ways to deliver some of that locally. And the first step in that is looking at our own economic recovery strategy and beginning to evolve that strategy to bring it into fit and coherence with NSET. So suggesting that as the key recommendations. As we go forward, there'll be more information coming up on NSET, and some of that may be available for the seminar. But certainly for the next committee chair, I would imagine there'll be significant more information available on the strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Keeler. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Hey, thank you, Chair. Just to welcome the Director's comments on that and encouraging reading from his report. I wanted just to ask about the timeline in terms of the revision of our own economic recovery strategy. What does he envisage that to be? And I would imagine it would come back to this committee. Thanks.
I'm envisaging Mr McPhee will have a report to the September committee chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, Smith. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. If I read this report my way, it's really not a very heartening report at all. And I've read the statement that was made by the Finance Minister in Parliament. And there's a whole list of reductions in budgets. Many of these budgets would apply to this island. And that troubled me very greatly when I saw it. I mean, quite specifically, this one's going to reduce, this one's going to reduce, and so on. We haven't been all that well served by the Scottish Government in terms of giving us finance in recent years, as you know. And this troubles me. I understand that Mr McKeever's trying to see in it that some of the priorities that the government is indicating are our priorities too. But there's not much chance that we're going to do much with our priorities if we are not given the finance to do it in the first place. It's something that troubles me really greatly, the fact that over the years our finances have been cut back again and again and again, and we really need to have a positive look at our finances. And this, I'm sure that the leader is well exercised on this particular issue, and the Chief Executive in trying to persuade the government that they really have to look at the Western Isles and give us a boost in our finances. Otherwise, they're just putting us on a downward spiral. I don't want that to be the case. I want to be positive about the islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Do you want to come back?
All I would say on that, Director, that there's two different issues. The strategy document, the transformation document, my view is that it is broadly in the correct place, and the strategy and the direction of travel is, I think, something we can hook into and work with. The financing behind it and budget issues are a different matter. So I'm making no comment on the budget issues. Obviously, we need finance to deliver, what is in there, and over the years, the level of finance available for economic development has diminished. The level of finance available to the enterprise agencies has diminished. So, the tools we have are weakening, but at the same time, the strategy is good, and we've got to find ways to work with the strategy. So two different things. The strategy is in the right direction, but the finances with it, I think, still have to be worked out.
Yes, thank you, Dan. And of course, too, the strategy has to, has to be looked at through the provisions of the Islands Act and impact assessed accordingly to what we need in and going forward. Chief Executive, if you want to come in.
Very briefly, Chair.
Sorry, it's like it.
Very briefly, Chair. It's more for Policy and Resources Committee than this committee, but you will have seen in my members' update advance warning of a seminar on the spending review, its consequences, and the political strategy which the Corla will wish to consider. Included within that, of course, is Islands Community as impact assessment of yet further reductions and a direction of travel, which calls on let's say, transformational activity which local government has already had to carry out, whereas other areas of the public sector arguably have not. So much to think about there for members for Policy and Resources Committee and the Corla, but we'll bring that together in a seminar after the recess.
Okay, we look forward to that, Executive. Thank you. Any other comments? Otherwise, the recommendation of 3.1 for your agreement. Item 21 is the Highlands and Islands Regional Economic Partnership, and I referred to this in my opening remarks. The report provides an update on progress with the Regional Economic Partnership and seeks agreement to support a portfolio of activity within the partnership that balances strategic delivery with local and island-specific issues. And the Director will speak to this report. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I will keep it brief, but I think it's important for members to be aware that the Regional Economic Partnership has now been set up and has become operational over the last number of months. The Scottish Government is keen to see every part of Scotland having a regional economic partnership where bodies within particular regions come together to collaborate, share resources and find new ways of adapting to challenges. So the Cornea is the first chair of the Regional Economic Partnership. A former leader was the first chairman, and the chairmanship has followed to our present leader, and the Cornea will chair for the rest of this year. So the partnership has begun looking at areas and ideas for transformation of the area. They looked at NSET at their last meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they agreed that they would develop a regional interpretation of NSET for the Highlands and Islands area. I have attached the minutes of the agendas of the last set of REP meetings, just so that members are aware of the type of business that is beginning to go through the REP. I think it will become a greater feature of our work over the next period, and I'll be providing update reports to committee as we go forward. So a new innovation, a new body, but I think it has the potential to become an important body over the next period, and I think members it'll be useful for members to be aware of the type of activity that is flowing through the REP. One of the things that I want to be sure, and the reasoning behind the recommendation is the regional vision is developed through the REP. It has to capture what the regional opportunities are, but it also has to be locally based, and it has to be able to pick up local and island specific agenda points and for these issues not to be lost in the rest of the regional plan. So wanting the power, if you like, of a Cornea decision around that we can take into the REP as required. Happy to leave it at that, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Houston Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. One of the suggestions made, and I think you're aware of this, Director, is that the cost of the ferry disruptions across the Chiefs network is one of the things this group should be looking at.
That's correct, Chair, and we had a senior officers group meeting on Monday following the last meeting of the Regional Economic Partnership, and that is one of the things I put on the agenda, and that will be an agenda item at the next meeting of the REP. We hope to do some economic research ahead of that meeting of the REP, but I hope this will be an important agenda item on the next meeting, and the REP will take this forward as a critical agenda item. I'm sure that the REP Chair will make sure that that will happen as well.
Thank you, Director. Any other leader?
Sorry.
Okay. Leader and then Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it will be raised, definitely. I think the recommendation is really important that we do ensure that the local issues are covered within the regional plan. I think there is an opportunity for it to kind of get lost within what's been done. So I think it's really good that it gives us the message we can take back to the REP that the Cornea is on board with that.
Thank you. Councillor, are you okay? Okay. Recommendation. So, sorry, Francis. Sorry. Councillor Francis Murray.
I'm going to revert to McFarlane. It's much easier. There's too many Murrays. There was a similar body in education called the RIC, the Regional Improvement Collaborative, and it contained the same 9 authorities. And one of the problems with the RIC was that the people in the councils didn't always know, I mean the employees within the councils didn't always know what the RIC was and what the RIC did, and where it sat between their own authority and national. And I think it would be important to ensure that people are aware of what can be considered. I don't mean just people in this chamber, I mean beyond that. Otherwise, it could just be seen as a another layer. And I know I can see it's very important, very valuable. But one of the problems we had with the RIC was that unless people were involved in it, in the schools, for instance, they didn't always know what it entailed. So I wouldn't like to see a similar concern with this.
Yes, I think the points Councillor Murray makes are important points, and I think we have to guard against the REP just becoming another form of talking shop. It has to be action orientated, and it has to bring some collaborative dynamic to ensure we're all pulling in the same direction. Scottish Government definitely see it as an important layer in regional collaborations and bringing regional players together. I think the Highlands and Islands REP is new. It is still too mature. There is still a lot of development to be done within the REP to get it to the kind of body I think it needs to be. Certainly, our colleagues in economic development and Highlands and Islands Enterprise, they are now beginning to embed themselves into the REP type of thinking, and I think bringing it to this committee and into the council, I think is going to be an important step in ensuring everyone is on board with it. But as I say, it is early yet for the REP. It has still to mature quite a bit. But I think the first two meetings have been quite good. Everyone seems to be coalescing together appropriately, and we'll just have to see how it develops over the next period.
Yeah. Very good, thanks very much. Recommendations then at 3.1. Now move on to item 22, the youth repopulation zone. Population demographic challenges are critical considerations for the coroner, and the report provides detail of the concept of the youth repopulation zone and seeks approval of a draft action plan which will be replicated across the Outer Hebrides in due course. And again, the Director will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. This is an innovation that has come out of the Convention of the Highlands and Islands. So the Convention COHI has been speaking about population and population-related issues over the last number of meetings. They're keen to explore new ways of doing things around population, and this idea of repopulation zones has been developed within COHI. So they've asked the membership of COHI to look at the areas across the Highlands and Islands that are facing possibly the acutest population challenges. So there's areas being identified in the Clyde Islands, in Sutherland, in Argyll and in the Outer Hebrides. And the part of the Outer Hebrides we've decided to focus in on as part of the repopulation work is Uist. As part of that work, what we've sought to do is bring together an overview of projects, activities across a range of different sectors that are happening in Uist, or we believe will happen in Uist over the next period. So we put together a reasonably comprehensive plan based on what we know is happening, a range of new innovations, integrating skills, integrating Gaelic development into that, and I've coalesced that into the plan, into the draft plan you see in front of you. So the thing we want to add to this plan is the government's national population plan. So this is very much locally driven. I think now we want to overlay it with some of the actions coming out of the government's population plan to take it to the next iteration. And the other thing we want to do to take it to the next iteration is to engage with the community. So suggesting in the recommendation that we use the draft in front of us as a community engagement tool, and that we think of how we engage with the community over the next period. One of the first actions we've done is to employ, working in partnership with Highlands and Islands Enterprise, employ a settlement officer. So a settlement officer is now in place for the repopulation zone, Karen McCreary, who's hit the ground running and is talking to a lot of groups. And just in the publicity around the repopulation zone, Karen has been contacted by a range of different people who are thinking about how they bring themselves and potentially their businesses to use. So I think there is something really interesting in this piece of work. So as I was saying, suggesting we use the action plan as a tool to collaborate and engage with the community. Happy to take any questions.
It's a good starting point to do that. Any questions on that item for the time being? Okay, we look forward to further engagement on that. So the recommendation 3.1 there for your agreement. So we now move in to item 23, the Scottish Local Authorities Economic Development Indicators Framework. The report provides an update following the publication of the framework. The final report noting that the Corner performed well in several areas of the economic development performance indicators. And Dom MacDonald, Economic Development Manager, is here to answer any questions, if you have any. Anything you want to add, Owen?
Thank you, Chair. Not particularly. The Cornwall's return for 2021, of course, is appended to the report, and we're currently working on sourcing, collating and submitting data for 21-22 for the next report.
Thank you. Okay, very good. The recommendations then are again at 3.1. That was for noting actually this report. Thanks very much. Item 24 is the Business Gateway Services, the COVID-19 and performance update for 21-22. The report provides an update on the Corner's support for businesses impacted by COVID-19 and on the performance of the Business Gateway services over these years. And it also seeks agreement to prioritise investment in economic recovery activity. The Corner's Economic Development Service and Business Gateway team have had a critical role to play in supporting the local economic recovery, and there's a lot of information in the report and providing a comprehensive overview of the activity over the last year. And I want to take this opportunity again to thank the team for their support to the local business community and the local economy during the pandemic and afterwards. Norman McLean, the Senior Business Development Officer who heads up Business Gateway, will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Norman McLean.
Oh, Norman's not here.
So I will.
Okay,
I'll also take this one. Thank you, Chair. As you say, a comprehensive report, lots of detailed information there, which reflects the breadth and range of activity undertaken by the Business Gateway team over the past couple of years. Section 6 deals specifically with the range of emergency assistance to businesses channeled through the Cornwall, over 21 million pounds of assistance to businesses during the pandemic. Section 7 covers the performance of the Business Gateway service across a range of indicators. Sections 8 and 9 looks at support to businesses, whether funded fully by the Cornwall internally or in partnership with others. And if I can draw your attention to 8.4, which deals with loan default. There's been an exercise carried out recently which looked at up to £9 million of loans that have gone to businesses from the Cornwall over the past number of years, over a decade, where the loan default rate is consistently around 3%, which is a remarkably low rate given in many of these instances the Cornwall is a lender of last resort, and some of the projects are considered fairly risky at that. So I think it's testament really to the default management and aftercare that's delivered through the service. Section 10 covers some of the wider national Business Gateway initiatives, and just to update members on what's going on there. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Owen. Any questions from members? Okay, thanks very much. And again, just reiterate our thanks to the team for all they've done in recent times. So the recommendations are there at 3.1. for your agreement. Item 25 is the community-led local development funding for 22-23, and I declare an interest, but will remain in the meeting as a member of the local action group. The report provides details of the Scottish Government rural community-led local development grants, including the Rural Communities Testing Change Fund, and seeks approval for the Corner to continue its function as lead partner for the Outer Hebrides Local Action Group in delivering this funding. Kathleen Morrison, Economic Development Officer, who previously led the LEADER programme, will speak to the report and answer any questions. Kathleen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give a few updates on the report since the report was written. Our lag allocation has now increased by 40k up to 255,806. However, the commitment deadline has not changed, and that still needs to be done before January 23, with all spend by March 23. The outcome of the spending review, of the Scottish Government spending review at the end of May, still hasn't been communicated to us for the 4 million. That's still outstanding, so we're awaiting to see how that will be allocated also. As per the report, the lag would prefer that the Corla remain as lead partner for the CLLD programme, as it has been a good relationship with the Corla to date. The lag are also still compiling their vision plan, or the business plan, and that has to be submitted in July. And that's been compiled through reviewing recent consultations. Due to the short time frame, we can't go out to engagement with communities. However, in the last programme, the lag did commission the Identifying Funding Gaps in the Outer Hebrides study, and that has been an important document to use to show what the needs of the communities are, as that was done pre and post pandemic as well. The emerging things coming through just now are energy efficiency trials, rural community transport, further supporting young people into community development and the decision-making side of that, and in helping and supporting communities in the pre-planning stages of projects. Following the Scottish Government approval of the plan, the lag hope to be in a position to begin supporting projects in September, and will publicise this widely to communities and also members. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Any questions for Kathleen? I mean, it'd be good to have some continuity, and it's a good working relationship, as Kathleen said, between the Cora as a lead with the local lag. So we hope that relationship can continue and the good teamwork that's taking place. So recommendation is 3.1 there for your agreement. Item 26, Outer Hebrides Visitor Infrastructure Development Plan. Report provides an update on the progress of the delivery of the plan and the outcomes of a consultation process, which have culminated in the preparation of a draft plan, which will be used as a tool for planning and investment in the sector going forward. There are 3 separate appendices to the report providing further detail from the consultants. Members, please note that there are no more area-based reports, and that the North Uist one has been included as an example. I would stress to members that these are draft documents and encourage comments and feedback from members directly to the officers and to feed into the consultation process. Murdo Mackay, Development Manager. Sorry?
Aye, sorry, Chair. Kathleen is taking this report as well.
That's fine. I'll finish the briefing note first. But I just want to introduce you to new members, Murdo. That you're a development manager and you're based in the Harris office. And I'll ask now Kathleen to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, apologies to members for the delay in forwarding the draft findings of the report, as it is still in consultation stage. As the Chair mentioned, it is still in draft document, so the document will change and will have further maps and information included, but comments are welcomed. The initial engagement shows that, as per the documents, that the lack of bins and public toilets, insufficient camper van waste disposal sites and visitor car parking still remain high on the list of issues that throughout the islands. To ensure communities and industry providers work where these were gathered, the period of community engagement was extended, and that is the reason for the delay in the report. Therefore, the visitor infrastructure plan is required to be submitted before any applications can be put forward to round 5 of the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, the RTIF. Therefore, it's unlikely that we'll be able to submit any at the moment. Visit Scotland have agreed to allow us to forward them a draft of the plan, as any future applications, successive applications, have to be based on the plan. So their reviewing of it will assist to ensure that we have future success in the future. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Any questions on that item? Time being. Okay, thanks very much, Kathleen. And the recommendations are 3.1 there for your agreement. Planning performance monitoring reports outstanding, and that's for noting. And the next scheduled meeting of the committee will be on Wednesday, 21st of September. And that was quite a long meeting and a hefty but exciting agenda. And I want to thank you all for your contributions and input out to it. And thank the officers and the clerks for the support.